All right, we are live as always. Let me know how my audio is. I am not smart on my own. I require help. Um, and yeah, we're going to be going over Jimmy Corsetti today. Jimmy Corsetti videos. Going to try to do it as long as possible. I think I'm live everywhere I'm supposed to be. My audio is okay now, but also tell me, please, when it starts, how the audio leveling is between the videos we're going to be watching and my audio. So yeah, if you're watching this not live, look down below. There's going to be a little thing that tells you where we're at, because I always leave a few minutes at the beginning and let people filter in, because people usually don't see it until it's actually live and fully going. And I got the thing ready. I'm getting a lot better at not, I'm getting a lot better at not at knowing what I'm supposed to be doing. Not what I'm supposed to be saying, but what I'm supposed to be doing. You just happen to be on X. Good. I'm glad. I don't have a stream schedule, Ethan. So like, it's just kind of whenever. I should probably get a stream schedule, but my schedule is pretty erratic, so it makes it difficult to do. So yeah, there's a bunch of videos I'm gonna be going over today. I got some Atlantis stuff, some biblical stuff, just everything Jimmy Corsetti has done. And the more interesting stuff is, well, it depends on what you think is more interesting. The more intangible stuff is Jimmy Corsetti's recent commentary on things like Gobekli Tepe, and on, not on the site itself, but on the archaeological response to it. And there are things about archaeology I like, and there's things I don't. Obviously, love archaeology. What's up, Vulpus? Nice to see you, brother. JC should be here soon, unless he's off doing something. I know he's going to be in the comments saying hi. Yeah. So again, I'm just waiting. Yes. Yeah, I'm just getting back into stuff, Big Yehuda. So I've been out of it for a while. But I am back in, locked in. I need to get back to, I got like there's more live streams this week. More interviews this week. I'm going on Jay Burden tomorrow. I don't know what time, but that's not live anyway. So that'll come out soon on Jay Burden's channel. Yeah, and if you're just joining us, I'm going to start the videos in just a few minutes. Yeah, 8 people. I usually start when it's about 8 or 9, so I could probably start soon. We're going to start with an absolute classic. Wait, are we? This isn't what I wanted to start with. No, we're going to start with this. Okay. What are we at? 3:30. Okay. Okay, here we go. Start with this one. Oh gosh, I gotta share it, present, share screen. Gotta say what I'm doing, because I'm got a touch of the tism. Now I'll go back to that one if I want to. Okay. Here we go. Theater mode. Okay, so this one is proof a mysterious lost ancient global civilization spanned virtually the entire planet. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Likely blow your mind, because by the end of this video, you will have seen overwhelming
You should be able to
evidence
hear that. Let me know if
a
you can.
mysteriously long-lost ancient human civilization once spanned virtually our entire planet. And the implications of that are incredible, because it means that what we were taught in school, and is still being taught and written about in the textbooks, is like really off from what actually occurred in our human history. Which is both amazing and exciting when you think about it. Now I'm about to show you more than 250 amazing photos and comparisons of ancient sites from around the world, which None of them, seen by themselves, prove a widespread global civilization. But when brought together and in comparison of other ancient sites that are oceans apart, it becomes nothing short of actual proof that there really was an ancient global civilization that spanned virtually every continent around the world. And you'll be left with the awkward question, which is, how was I not aware of these details before? Why is nobody in the scientific or academic community talking about this and bringing this information to light? Like, shouldn't this be in the news or something? Because none of what you're about to see is a
archaeology
secret.
science.
It's been right in the open for thousands and thousands of years, which is partly what makes it so mind-blowing. The widespread global extent of these similarities are what made my jaw drop, and I'm willing to bet that you'll never see these ancient sites the same way ever again. Now, before I smother you with a couple hundred photos and comparisons, let me first preface this video by pointing out that the Roman Empire is considered to have been the largest and most widespread ancient civilization ever known to have existed, with the Caesars controlling approximately...
Oh, wait a minute. Okay. This always happens. Forget about the Mongols. Forget about the Mongols. I'm pretty sure they were larger. I mean, you can judge it by different metrics, right? But like, as far as land area, pretty sure the Mongols got it, but not as long lasting. Yeah, and longer lasting, I mean, it depends. Well, no, it doesn't depend, because there was the Roman Republic, and then the Empire, and then the Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantines, as they're called for some reason. But the Chinese, man, you've heard me talk about it. If you ever heard that like 2-hour Chinese history rant I went on with the guys from Biting the Bullet, Luke and Typo, also my co-host on 5 Till Midnight, which is the comedy politics podcast I do every Monday, that China is the longest lasting culture on Earth. I mean, it depends on how you define it, but the Han Chinese, they're something else. But regardless,
approximately 1 in 4 people on Earth during its height nearly 2,000 years ago. This included most all of modern-day Europe, the Mediterranean, North Africa, and various places throughout the Mideast, a vast area especially for ancient times. I show you this map because for the rest of the video, I'm going to show you dozens and dozens of striking similarities from civilizations.
Okay, let's see what we got here. So, see if we can guess. Down here, that's not the Yucatan Peninsula, but it looks like it's in Mayan land. This is like stretches of the Inca. That's got to be Peru right there. That looks like Rapa Nui, Easter Islands, Egypt. These are big X's. I guess they got to be. It's a big picture. It's like central India. This is Iraq, probably Babylon or Sumer, Thailand, East Papua. What is this one? What is that? What island is that? That's weird. That's not, that's too far west to be Hawaii. Oh, maybe no, Hawaii's over here. Japan. That's probably the site underwater. I don't know what that one is. That's in a weird spot in China. Beijing and Shanghai are like up here. The Byzantine story is the beginning of the fraud of history. Can you expand on that? What do you mean? It might be a good point, but I would say I think the frauds started quite a bit before that. It's kind of an ancient idea. That's like Constantinople right there. Okay.
That are not supposed to have had any contact or connection to each other at all, having been separated by oceans and continents. So with that said, here we go. Perhaps one of the first things that comes to mind when we hear the word ancient ruins are the pyramids, yet many people are not aware that pyramids have been found throughout 5 continents around the world. Although most everyone surely is familiar with not only the Egyptian pyramids, but the pyramids of Central America as well, along with various pyramids within Southeast Asia and the country of Cambodia.
Oh, what's that?
But let me be clear. It is firmly stated and taught in the world of academics, historians, and archaeologists that there is no connection between ancient Egypt, Cambodia, or Central America. In fact, it is considered to be, and I quote, fringe science, pseudo-history, and pseudo-archaeology.
I would if I wanted to pause this for longer, I would look at this and see who edited this. John Hoops. Ugh.
To suggest that it was possible for these ancient civilizations to have been connected across the oceans and the continents. In fact, there have been many books and scientific journals written expressing just that. But let's take a second to compare the unique similarities between the step pyramids of Egypt, the step pyramids of Central America, and the step pyramids of Southeast Asia. Archaeologists will tell you that the similarity is simply related to the primitive structural design of the pyramids themselves, and that you start with a larger foundation and make each additional layer smaller than the one below it. They go on to explain that this is the most simple structural design possible, and it's just a matter of natural evolution.
Which is a possible idea, but often what they do is they present these theories as if they're facts, especially when historiography, which is like the study of history, like how we study history. Once it gets to the textbooks, man, it's very rare that they actually like discuss it. They just present it. And these types of arguments, they only exist in an academic space in any consequential way. A little late. Is this another guy who doesn't believe that a pyramid is the easiest way to stack things on top of each other? I was making pyramids out of sand when I was 5. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. It's like it is a possible explanation, and it is an explanation that makes sense. It's just not the only explanation, right?
Within varying civilizations to come up with this design on their own, again, naturally and organically. I disagree. However, these pyramid similarities are not a main supporting argument for this video, but rather a start point. But I have to say that I do not think that these similarities are just a coincidence,
Mexico,
especially when you consider them from a side-by-side comparison. Look and think for yourself. Here's what I would argue, that although in today's world we are separated by oceans and continents, we are still a global civilization that is absolutely connected, regardless of country borders and different governments.
Wow.
And in any corner of the earth, in any major city, you will find skyscrapers. And although they're all different from each other, they're still the same exact structural concept, made of steel, concrete, and glass. Different in architecture, yes, but essentially the same nonetheless. In fact, the very first skyscraper started somewhere, which happens to be in Chicago. From there, the concept spread across the world. It is my opinion that the same thing likely happened with the pyramids. And when you see what else I have to share with you in this video, you'll understand why.
What is that one in the middle? Okay, so that's Cambodia, I guess. I haven't seen that one. I think I've been to Angkor Wat when I was a kid. I've been to Cambodia, and then I guess that is Chichen Itza. Chichen Itza is slightly farther north than that, but I guess that's what he was pointing to on the map. It didn't have to be exact.
And like I mentioned a few moments ago, pyramids are found across 5 continents around the world. And one place that I know most people never knew of is Greece. Look at this here. And although much smaller compared to other pyramids around the world, it is undoubtedly very old and yet very sophisticated.
Yeah, the pyramids and ziggurats probably are related. I mean, that wouldn't even be controversial. That would be like, the ziggurats. Well, actually, I don't know. A lot of them, there was a long time that they were building pyramids in Egypt. Ziggurats are what? 5,000 years old, something like that, maybe a little bit less. Constantine I describes to rewrite history to make claims to the ancient world. The fact that a small city-state conquered the known world is laughable. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Made up of polygonal stones that fit together like a tight-fitted puzzle, requiring no mortar or concrete to hold them together, simply a makeup of intelligent mathematics and precision.
I wish I remembered his name.
Weathered over what appears to be...
that might not be this one, but there's a Hungarian dude on X that believes, and he's shown evidence of, and he does experimental archaeology, that a lot of these stone structures were cast with they had some sort of concrete stone type thing that they mixed to make them, which would make more sense than moving heavy stones, but it's definitely not true in all cases.
Thousands and thousands of years.
Maybe not any of them.
I wonder how many people watching this video had never seen or heard of this Greek pyramid before, particularly people living outside of Europe and the Mediterranean.
Relatively small.
Something else that you may not be aware of involving ancient Greece is that they have polygonal stone walls a couple different places around the country. They've survived thousands of years and some of the worst earthquakes in human history.
Whoa, look at that. Those don't look natural. How'd they get them down like that? Huh.
They've survived thousands of years and some of the worst earthquakes in human history. Most people are not aware that Greece has polygonal walls, as you won't find this structure design in and around Athens, where all the other notable ancient Greek ruins are found and visited. And besides that, when we typically think of or hear of ancient polygonal stone walls,
that's the Hungarian
the ruins of South America and the country of Peru likely come to mind, which I'll be discussing more of in a moment. But
yeah, okay, and these ones especially, and there's like little nipples like that come out of it.
Just like the little-known stone walls in certain places in Greece, there are also a few examples in Italy as well. Again, something most people do not realize, as you won't find an abundance of this type of ancient stone structure in and around Rome either. And all the other Roman tourist attractions take attention away, just like in Greece. It's also worth mentioning that there are incredible and massive polygonal stone walls in various places in Turkey as well.
Okay, just so we're clear, the places in Turkey, like, that was Greece. Like, that was Greek land for a long time. And it should be still. And also, a lot of Turkish people are actually Greek. Turks are, like, from the steppes. So this was a cultural... Many such cases of this. Like Anglo-Saxons in England, they're heavy Brittonic, as in, like, Celtic admixture in there.
Take a look at these, and again, be reminded
even if they're in Turkey, this is
massive
from
stone walls in Peru.
Well, depending on what age.
Definitely not exactly the same, but the concept sure is. And it's
like, come on, man. These, to me, it makes most sense that these were cast somehow. If you just look at them, like especially this one that's like rounded, or they, had some technology to wear down the stone, but that's hard to do even today.
Exactly the same, but the concept sure is. And it's unbelievably difficult of an undertaking to accomplish. But that aside, and although these are certainly credited to the Greeks and Romans, we have to ask ourselves why we find something so strikingly similar all the way over in Peru. Not only that, we find similar examples within ancient Egypt as well. This raises questions because, as far as we were taught, there can be no possible connection between the ancient cultures of South America and Egypt,
look at that
or to that of Greece and Italy. However, what I'm about to show you next...
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. What is this? How do they explain this? That stone's not natural. What? That's crazy.
Egypt, or to that of Greece and Italy. However, what I'm about to show you next may take you by surprise, as there are several examples of incredible ancient polygonal stone walls all the way over in the island country of Japan. Leave a comment if you are completely unaware of these walls. And like I said,
oh my gosh,
there are a variety of different examples of them, and I'm only showing you a few here in this video.
Not natural, but I don't know how they explain them besides being cast. Compared to the stone walls of South America, which, although it's not exactly the same, they will remind you of my skyscraper analogy I gave moments ago. Is this really just a coincidence, or a simple matter of organic human ingenuity within different civilizations that are worlds apart? Well... Oh, I mean, like, they're... How did they do this with the stones? I love how the Japanese one is like more... It's more uniform. It's like it's flatter on the surface. Like that's just... The material culture that a culture produces is a reflection of their own culture, and Japanese stuff is just so precise. That's why I love Japanese cars, but I digress. You can see that here, like they're more refined almost. Not that these ones aren't; they're still very nice, but this one just the flatness of it.
If that's what you think, wait until what you see next. This is a stone box sarcophagus found in ancient Japan. Now, compare it to a notable stone sarcophagus that made headlines around the world in 2018 upon its discovery, with the whole world waiting in anticipation for it to be open so we could see what's inside.
Like I made 2 videos on this if you're interested,
but look at the design of the stone lid, and now compare to the stone lid found in Japan. Both having somewhat of a triangular shape, although not exactly the same. However, now compare the Japanese stone lid to others that are found in ancient Egypt.
Oh.
Wow.
Well, that's
This
interesting,
is
though.
beyond similar. Look at this.
So that's something that could just be a coincidence, but like it's not just having one example like this, right? It's having like a bunch of examples like this, where it's like if there's enough things that are unlikely but could be explained by coincidence. The hexagonal shape is not convincing to me, but the actual like nubs at these regular intervals, that's more interesting.
This and think for yourself. I do not see a coincidence here. I see a connection. An ancient connection that's not supposed to be possible at all. I mean,
connection.
We're talking Egypt and Japan.
And it is possible.
Worlds apart,
possible.
especially in ancient times. And of course, according to the textbooks, there is no connection at all. Now, remember the Japanese polygonal stone walls I just shared with you? And let's head all the way to the complete opposite side of the Pacific Ocean to remote Easter Island, which is more than 2,000 miles from the nearest point of South America.
Use those
of course, you know, when we think of Easter Island, the notable Moai statues are probably the first thing that come to mind. Many people are surprised when they learn just how massive many of them actually are once they've been dug up and excavated. Just look at that.
That is one big boy. Look at that. Gorgeous.
However, what most of you are likely to find even more surprising is to learn that there is an example of a polygonal stone wall on this island.
Oh my gosh.
Take a look at the details of this wall. I myself did not know this existed until creating this video, as it's the Moai statues that get all the attention. Now, compare this wall to a wall all the way over in Peru. Look at these comparisons and tell me that this isn't a total...
And I've done videos on this, but there is some evidence that there's a connection between Rapa Nui, like the Polynesians on Rapa Nui and farther west, and with the west coast of South America. There's some evidence of that. It's not fully convincing, but there is some evidence of that, and that is more than plausible because we know that the Polynesians had the capability to get there. It's just a matter of whether they did. These guys are going thousands of miles on relatively primitive boats, canoes, to go all over the Pacific Ocean. So it wouldn't be crazy to think that they got to South America.
Match. The side-by-side comparisons definitely make my eyebrow go up because the consensus of academic scholars is that there is no connection between Easter Island and Peru. It is also widely accepted that the people of Easter Island came from the Polynesian islands to the west and settled on Easter Island. I do not disagree with that at all. However, let me quickly remind you of something before I show you something else, which is that transoceanic sea travel during this time frame was considered to be impossible, and again, to suggest it is fringe and pseudo-archaeological like I stated earlier. So, how do we explain the unbelievably similar comparison to the little-known cloud people statues of Peru?
I've never seen these in my life.
Tell me this isn't unbelievably similar. And again...
They both have protruding chins. I don't know. Extended brows. The flat face is very different. I could see... Well, the thing is that with more proving connections, it's just more evidence, but on its own it's not, it's not concrete.
Created at a time when travel between Peru and Easter was not considered a possibility. But that's not all. Compare these statues to others as far away as Turkey and get this.
The hands are very, very similar. And this is Gobekli Tepe here. Ancient Polynesian Habsburgs with the chin. Good one, brother.
Indonesia. Although not exactly the same, when you look at the more nuanced details such as hand positions and unique facial and jaw structure, I mean, come on. Is this also just a coincidence?
Oh, now you can see it.
And then we remind you that the site in Turkey you see here, Gobekli Tepe, is the world's oldest megalithic site on Earth, dating back closer to 12,000 years, and was buried up until excavations began in just the 1990s. Something you'll find at this same site is the specific stone carving of someone holding a handbag. This is a very unique and specific connection that you will also find all the way back in Mesoamerica among the Olmec.
Right. the Olmecs, and I think the Mayans as well, which are like they like. I think it's pretty well established that the Mayans and a lot of other Mesoamerican civilizations were inspired by the by the Olmecs. They came out of the Olmecs, which we don't know as much about, but these things are Olmec here. Yeah, there's god, like the gods and the pantheons of the Mayans and the Aztecs. There's like, just like with Greeks and Roman gods and goddesses, they have like the Mayan version and the Aztec version.
Culture. This is so unbelievably similar. And
I haven't heard of that, Pable.
That the bags
Pable,
themselves.
did I pronounce that right? I would guess where you're from, but if I get it wrong, you're going to be upset with me. In the Balkans, so I'm not going to guess that you're Serbian. I'm not going to guess that, and I'm not going to guess that you're Bosnian, because I don't want you to be upset with me.
Stone carving dates back 6,000 years earlier from our first known documented civilization, which is the Sumerians, which they themselves have depictions holding this bag, and they are 6.
Yeah, how do you explain this handbag, man? Serbian. Okay, so it was the first one that I guessed. Thank you. No problem. Glad.
6,000 years older than we are from present day right now. Incredible. How can something so unique be just a coincidence? However, that's what science community of academics and archaeologists say about it. Yet, most people walking around society have never even heard of this before.
Gosh, that's
the authorities
weird, man.
in the academic world shun it, yet they never even shared it with you so you could think for yourself. So, what do you think about it?
Why would we think for ourselves? We have archaeologists for that. They need to tell us. They're the experts. They know. They know how to interpret it.
Having seen about these handbags for yourself, is it just a coincidence? Now, speaking of the Sumerians, it's also worth mentioning that they share another similarity to that of ancient Greeks and Hindu gods of ancient India, which is the depiction of the trident.
Isn't this just like an Indo-European, a proto-Indo-European pantheon thing? All of these cultures are derived from Indo-Europeans.
But does this prove a connection? Well, by itself, no. But that is not the only similarity shared between these three separate cultures. For example, the caduceus is the symbol showing two snakes intertwined and found throughout the modern world today among the medical and healthcare industries. What most people do not know is it has been found dating back as far as the ancient Sumerians of 6,000 years ago, like I just mentioned.
With the handbag?
Well, you may find it interesting to learn that this symbol was also utilized by the ancient Greeks, as well as in ancient India. Again, another interesting and specific coincidence for three separate cultures separated by time and distance. But it does not stop there. Even look at the depiction of a Greek god and Hindu god battling a multi-headed snake. Now that is a very specific and exclusive similarity, but again, by itself, it is not earth-shattering. Although Greece and India are far apart, the ancient borders of the Greek Empire were once not so far away from India during the height of their civilization. But you would think that these interesting details would be shared in school and the textbooks as a possible link, as a vast majority of people out there have never seen or heard.
I'm confused here. Isn't it like established that there's a link? Like, don't all these gods derive, or do people claim that the Hindu gods don't derive from the Indo-Europeans? Like the Vedic texts and all that stuff. Like it's established in the archaeological record that the Indo-European expansion happened. Am I crazy here? Can someone, what am I doing? What am I doing? This video is from 4 years ago, I guess, but yeah, Greeks made it to Bactria, Greco-Bactrians. Yeah, we had that. And that was like, and that's way later than the Indo-European stuff.
Heard of these details before. It seems to me that the ancient Greeks were more connected to India than is currently known or discussed, but let me keep going. I'm sure everybody is familiar with the incredible gold funerary masks of the ancient Egyptians. But what's interesting is that this ties into a similarity of the Inca of Peru and South America. This is an incredibly rare thing as well, as I only found one other culture that, and in only a few cases, also used gold funerary masks, and that was the Greeks, but only in the latter part of their...
Okay. I mean, just having gold masks, I don't think tells me that much.
Civilization. And, you know, I have to say, isn't it amazing that the Egyptians were by far the best, the most highly skilled and sophisticated makers of these gold masks in comparison? And they did so thousands of years prior to the Inca or the Greeks. And speaking of gold masks, notice the depiction of a cobra snake at the forehead, something you'll also see on countless stone statues of pharaohs within ancient Egypt. Well, now take a look at how the cobra snake was depicted above the heads of ancient Hindu gods. Here you can see just a few examples. And although not exactly the same, this is without a doubt a specific similarity. I mean, why would anyone think to depict this?
Yeah, so what Pavle is saying here, Pavle, please tell me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I think this is well established in the archaeological record, though. There's even a lot of like Greco-Bactrian statues. I don't know why he's not bringing those up.
A cobra snake at the head. Of course, you can read the explanations provided by scholars, which is not consequential to this video, but rather the similarity itself is the significance, because there is absolutely no known acknowledged connection between ancient Egypt and ancient India. But let me keep going. Now, take a look at these examples of stone nubs on ancient sites in India.
Nubs, not nipples. That's what they call them.
Many of you may have already heard me and others share examples of these unique stone nubs that are found in Peru and Egypt. Here are some examples found at Egyptian sites, including even that of a pyramid in Giza, as well as at the Assyrian as well. And this is just to show you a few examples. Now, let me show you a few examples found in Peru, which there are many examples at various sites throughout this country. And let me point out real quick that I do not know the purpose of these nubs.
The Incas or
but it is fair to say that it's not related to moving
smaller
or
ones.
lifting these stones as you would first think, because most of the stone blocks do not have them. Only some of them do. Plus, these nubs are found on various bedrock stones, which obviously had no intention of being moved in or lifted. Here are just a few examples to share what I mean by that. So, whatever their purpose was, it's not important to the point that I'm trying to make, although it's a fun discussion for another video. The point I'm making here is to show you the widespread global nature of these nubs. And let me say this real quick, that even
I mean,
if
I
the
feel like
purpose of these
a
stone
lot of
nubs
it is pretty
involved
well
moving or lifting the
established.
stones themselves, then I would argue...
Like there's that mainstream book I've recommended that's really good, written by mainstream archaeologists, The Horse, the Wheel, and Language, that talks about the language evidence as well as the physical evidence in the archaeological record of the horse appearing with the wheel and the domestication of the horse being tied in with the wheel in the Indo-European expansion. But I don't know. Waiting on the red-haired mummies from Peru, yeah.
That it's even more supportive evidence of a widespread global connection. I mean, we have different ways of moving and lifting stones today, and we are a global civilization that pretty much uses the same exact technology, right? So if there was some sort of purposeful stone mark on any stone that we're moving or lifting, that would be because we're using the same technology to do so. So if we find these stone nubs across the world, as you're about to see, then you could argue that it's more supportive evidence that the ancients had a widespread global connection.
Yeah, but what are the nubs
getting
for,
back to the widespread phenomena
what
of
are
the
they
nubs,
for?
here are a few additional examples at various sites in India. And again, notice that they're on some, but not all of the stones.
What?
I'll be curious to see comments of how many people that were already aware of these nubs in Egypt and Peru, who were only just now learning of these nubs being in India as well. Leave a comment if you are. But here's where it becomes even more thought-provoking, as these nubs are at sites all over the world. For example, even at an ancient quarry in China. I'd be curious to know if there are other examples found at ancient sites in China, which is not easy to learn as many sites are closed off to the public. Lame, right?
Very.
But you'll even find an example of nubs in Japan, which is interesting when you consider what I already pointed out involving the polygonal stone walls within Japan as well, and especially the comparison of the stone sarcophagus to the ones found in Egypt.
See, this is where it gets more interesting when you start building like multiple connections that could be explained by coincidence, but they're specific enough where they individually they can be explained by coincidence, but then there's enough of them and they're unique enough that they might not be. Yeah, Pavle, I've said this before. It's possible. The first emperor of China was like, there is possible evidence that the Indo-Europeans went that far. In the same way Muhammad was. I don't actually know anything about Muhammad's background. But yeah, I've posted on Twitter before, half jokingly, that that Qing Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China, looked like me. But I don't know. Maybe not.
But even if we head to the remote Micronesia,
it would be a bad look for the Chinese if that were true. They actually have not opened his tomb out of respect, and possibly out of the idea that it would not look good for the Han Chinese if their George Washington basically was a like R1B like Indo-European, basically white guy. It wouldn't look good for them. But it's possible.
Indonesian island of Palau, where there is at least one example of nubs on another sarcophagus. I'd be curious if there were other examples that existed on the island, which I bet if there's one, there's more.
Whoa, wait a minute. They're not as uniform, but what are I mean, I guess they could just be carrying things, but they could just be explained by that. Like carrying handles.
Existed on the island, which I bet if there's one, there's more. Even as we head west to the islands of Indonesia, where I already shared the fascinating similarity between the Moai statues of Easter Island, Peru, and Turkey, well, you will also see examples of nubs here as well, and if you look closely, you will see more than just the few that grab your eye when you first see the image. But I really wasn't kidding when I said that these nubs are all over. Even if we head back to Africa, to the country of Ethiopia, you can see nubs on a stone sarcophagus there as well. Whoa. And if we head to the neighboring country of Sudan, to where most people don't even realize also has pyramids and of incredible precision, although much smaller than those of the pyramids of Giza.
Smaller, but
someone please tell me what on earth happened to make half of these just blown up or ripped apart in half. Notice that? What on earth is that about? But if we look closely, and I'm sorry that the pictures are not of the best quality, you will see nubs on some of the stones. And keep in mind that these stone blocks are...
Dude, how do they explain these nubs? Like, does anybody mainstream have an explanation for them at all? I haven't read any papers on this or anything.
Much larger than you realize, and so are the nubs. So these are not just blemishes. Hopefully we can get our hands on better photos of these pyramids and other nubs that may be found on them. But even if we head to Europe, you will find examples of nubs in various countries, including Bulgaria, and again, notice that the nubs are on some but not all of the stone blocks, as well, like I mentioned, at other locations. But we can even find examples of nubs in Syria, again, on some blocks, but most are without them. And if we head to Greece, there are a couple locations that have them as well. Interesting, though, that we don't find these nubs in Athens, at least from what I saw, and if they are, they certainly are not in abundance on the most popular ancient sites we normally see from the ancient Greeks and the tourist attractions that are there in Athens. Even if we head to the Italian island of Sardinia, which is in the middle...
Yeah, okay, so Sardinia is a weird place. Like, in Sardinia... Sardinia, not Corsica, which is the one to the north of it. But Sardinia has, like... They have a lot of really old stuff. Islands are notoriously weird in archaeology. They seem to produce very weird cultures. You can see this with, like, the Haida... which are like they're called the Vikings of the Pacific Northwest, off the coast of Washington State, or British Columbia, Canada, rather, both really. But Sardinia has like their DNA is like pre-Indo-European more so than other places, similar to the Basque people. And there were multiple waves of Indo-Europeans. So like the Celts were like the first or the second, and then after them is like other people, most of the rest of Europe. Obviously, barring like the Slavs. You know what? Never mind. I don't do genetics. I do genetics, but I don't. Could the nubs just be decorations that were shown over time? Noses on statues often fall off or reduced. Yeah, they could be. We don't really know. I'm not really confident at all with what they are. But you're talking about nodes here, like the nodes. Like, how can they be electrical if it's on stone? Like, stone doesn't conduct electricity, right? What's up, Minoan? Good to see you, brother.
Middle of the Mediterranean Sea. There are examples of nubs there as well.
Where is Jason?
Same thing if we head to Turkey, where you can find an abundance of nub examples at various sites throughout the country.
I knew
for brevity
these
of this
existed.
video,
I didn't know how
I'll show
many
just
there
a
were.
few to display the connection. But let me interject real quick here, since I
Vibrations,
just
okay.
mentioned that there are nubs found in Italy and in Greece and elsewhere around the Mediterranean, because some people might jump to the conclusion that, hey, wait a second, this is just a matter of the Greeks or the Romans, but that can't be the case because, as we know, there are nubs in Japan, there are nubs in Peru, there's nubs in Indonesia and elsewhere. So if that were the case, that it was just simply, oh, a Roman or a Greek thing, then why do we not see more examples of these, one, within their capitals, all over the place, within the notable tourist attractions that we always see and hear about, as well as the fact we'd have to say, hey, were the Romans or the Greeks capable of traversing the ocean at vast distances? Because that would completely contradict what we learned in school as well, and what the scientific community say is even possible. So something to think about. So with that said, it seems to me that at a minimum, based on what we've seen so far, the widespread nature of these ancient nub phenomena and these other aspects we've shared so far in the video, that at a minimum, it shows that regardless the ages of these...
Yeah, so this thing, India also resists the theory of conquest. Brahmins want to be locals, not invaders. I think genetically they are today a lot more related to local people, but a lot of this stuff becomes very political. It becomes very like, people don't want to know that their history is maybe not entirely their own, even though, like, just because some people came in 2,000 years ago, it doesn't make your history not yours. But yeah, academics reject well, I shouldn't generalize that much, but academics often reject how politicized this stuff is and their own politicization of it.
Things, or who made them, that at a minimum, there's far more to the story of what we thought we knew about our ancient past as it is. Regardless of the age or who did it, there's clearly something more that we don't know about. Now, let me keep going because I have more to share. So in previous videos, I've shared unique comparisons between angled structures of ancient sites in Peru to that of Egypt, and these are just a couple examples. Now, I've also shared examples of that of trapezoidal doorways. So let's head back to ancient sites within...
Okay, it's kind of just the shape of a person, right? Like with flat lines.
India. Look at this here, cut out of solid stone. Make no mistake, these symmetrical angles would have made the construction far more difficult to do compared to a straight line. And I'll give further supporting evidence of that in a second, but look at these
I see. Okay, because of the angle of it. I'm not into engineering or anything, but like, is there a structural purpose to that? But rather than being straight up and down, like 90-degree angles, they're outward, like 93-degree angles. And this angle is like normal across different parts of this place. So like, or different parts of the world, which is unique enough to maybe be explained by coincidence, but maybe a connection.
Different trapezoidal doorways first.
The
now,
chunky
let's
Venus
head to the
had to get through
opposite
the
side
door
of the
somehow.
world, again to South...
Yeah, that's what it is. That's the purpose. All these ancient cultures just loved BBWs. That's what's going on here.
America. Let's first notice the cutout itself, which is not exactly the same as in India, but similar.
Look at that landscape. Itself, that is beautiful.
Is not exactly the same as in India, but similar and with great precision, and equally difficult to accomplish. Now, look at just a couple examples of trapezoidal doorways in various places throughout Peru. Of course, not exactly the same as within India, as these sites in Peru utilize separate stones rather than just one solid stone cutout. But to emphasize my point that the trapezoidal design is far more difficult than straight lines, you have to appreciate that it would be far easier to cut a bunch of square or rectangular stone blocks of the same exact dimensions and then stack them upon each other into the design of a doorway. But when going the route of a trapezoidal design, each layer of block is a different shape than that of the one above or below it in order to achieve the symmetrical angle. That right there is next level difficulty. Now, again, this is not exactly the same as in India, but let me remind you again of the example involving the skyscrapers across the world. All different types of architecture, none are the same, but they're still essentially the same thing, just different. It's worth mentioning that these are not the only examples of trapezoidal doors you'll find around the world, though. In fact, a certain place in Italy has trapezoid doors, and this feature can even be found in ancient Egypt as well. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
And real quick, the site
and again, all of these things individually can be explained by coincidence, but when you put them all together, it's different.
Here in Italy is in Lazio, and it was a tomb. Take a look at a few different photos here. Observe not just the shape of the doorway, but also the windows. And notice that it has false windows as well. Now let's compare that to Peru and tell me that this isn't incredibly similar. In fact, when you compare how there are sites that have both real and false windows, and of the same unique trapezoidal shape, and in combination of the other same style trapezoidal doorways also found in Peru as we just shared, this should make you wonder. But again, none of these details seen by themselves prove a global connection. You have to look at everything from the whole. Now, I had a career as a corporate fraud investigator where I would investigate employees that were suspected of stealing and defrauding the company. And I would gather evidence and build a case that would eventually lead to an arrest and prosecution. And what I can tell you is that in the court of law, regardless of the crime, that if you don't have, caught red-handed on videotape or something of the crime, what you do is you build up a bunch of points of evidence, line items of evidence, at this place, at this time, and you gather, and eventually all those lines of evidence lead to what's considered proof and will lead to a conviction. So let me ask you this. When you look at all the information that I've shared so
Luke makes some good stuff. How you doing, brother? Good to see you.
in this video, all the physical evidence, the details, is it really just a coincidence? Or when you piece it all together and you look at all the information together as opposed to individually, because you could write anything off. Oh, trapezoidal door, it's possible that's just a coincidence.
I'm not sure.
The tridents, coincidence. All of this could be just a coincidence.
Well, the tridents aren't coincidence, right? Like that comes from the Indo-European pantheon, I think. I think that's like not controversial. I could be wrong though.
And inconsequential when you look at it by itself. But when you bring it all together, does this not amount to actual proof that clearly there's far more going on in our ancient past than what we ever thought? I mean, let's review real quick.
Why are you going to do him like that, man? Luke's like real Indiana Jones, not like Flint Dibble wearing baggy clothes, keeping his hat on so he doesn't have to wear headphones normally for some reason. Yeah, Luke's actually going out there. A lot of the guys I'm friends with on Twitter actually go out to places. I don't do as much of that. I'm very more reading and writing.
We have gold funerary masks among 3 separate and far apart cultures.
The existence of just gold masks doesn't really
at all.
tell me much.
We have depictions of cobra snakes at the head of 2 different cultures, along with depictions of...
Yeah, okay. This right here, though. The cobra thing. So we have like with the Mayan connection with the Mississippian culture, they have the snake, and that snake is connected just like these things, the worship of gods, and the worship of gods is like attached to subsistence strategies and culture often, and you have the snake connection with the fact that in cornfields snakes keep away pests, so you would deify snakes because they're important. So I wonder if the cobra has some sort of connection. I haven't looked into these gods as much, which would point to them being related.
We have depictions of cobra snakes at the head of 2
I
different
wish
cultures,
he was given dates as
along
well.
with depictions of the caduceus among 3 different cultures, along with depictions of the tridents among those cultures, depictions of handbags etched in stone, separated by, in some cases, tens of thousands of years when you consider...
That's the Olmec on the right, along with the rattlesnake.
Gobekli Tepe to the connection of the Olmecs in Mesoamerica. I mean, really, is that detail just a coincidence? How specific can we get? We also have the creepy similarity of the Moai statues to others in Peru, Turkey, and Indonesia. We also have a bizarre similarity between Egypt and Japan.
Okay, so I was talking about carrying handles earlier, but these ones are not functional as carrying handles without some sort of other piece put on them. So that doesn't really work there.
Consider that stone box sarcophagus and how similar they both look, and having had no connection between those 2 cultures that were a world apart. We also have polygonal stone blocks found throughout the world, ranging from Easter Island, Peru, Egypt, Japan, and throughout the Mediterranean. And we also have the stone nub phenomena that are found across the world, including, again, Japan, Micronesia, Indonesia, Egypt, Peru, and again throughout Africa and Europe.
Yeah, so okay, pre-flood tech, right? Like we talk about the flood. The flood exists in many, many different cultures. And of course, archaeologists, mainstream archaeologists, love to talk about indigenous myths and their significance. And I'm with them, man. Indigenous myths tell us a lot. They told us, they basically allowed us to figure out how the Moai statues were moved by likely, very likely, this system of ropes back and forth. And in the legend, they said they walked, and people pulling on the ropes to jerk them back and forth very slowly in some sort of ritual, that matches walking, right? Where they walk to their final resting place. It also matches that there are many of them broken that are found on the side of pathways that would have been, they failed and it dropped and fell and broke. But like keeping this over thousands of years, right? Keeping this level of technology and this cultural knowledge and what you're revering, it would make sense, and it's more than possible that this was done in the past, because they would have been continuing with the same subsistence strategy. They're not going to be changing their gods. People don't change their gods unless there's a reason for the gods or their whatever sort of religious system they have to not make sense to their world anymore. That's why we have shifts over time. That's why Protestantism comes about. It's why Christianity comes about and replaces paganism. It's tied in with the subsistence strategy and the culture that is with it. Same with the rattlesnakes attached to the cultivation of corn, Quetzalcoatl, and Quetzalcoatl's like other related gods. Kukulkan, I think, for the Mayans. I might be getting that wrong, but yeah, it's and we have an example like in India. There are Brahmins in India that have continued with a system of retaining orally the ancient, like 2,000-3,000 year old Vedic texts through an oral tradition. I think that almost paradoxically, the oral traditions are able to be kept better than written traditions in a culture that is less stable. And by stable, I mean like staying the same over a long period of time.
Consider all of that, and now take a second look at the similarities between the pyramids of Egypt, Cambodia, and Central America.
Yes, Pable agrees.
Do these side-by-side comparisons really suggest a simple and natural evolution of structural design that are totally organic and natural within itself?
They could.
Or is it when you study the specific and truly unique aspects, and in combination with everything else shared in this
video, combination, yes,
does it seem to be more than just a coincidence? Academics profusely reject an ancient global connection or civilization of any kind.
They really do.
And they ridicule others that suggest it with essentially name-calling, words like fringe and pseudo. Yet they never actually go through and share all of the details with those who they intend to persuade. Look at all these details that I've shared in this video and think for yourself.
I have continued to make open call-outs, it's still available to literally anybody who will argue against my evidence against Flint Dibble, my evidence that shows that he was wrong about a lot of things and that he did not make a good point in his quest, his mission to prove that Graham Hancock couldn't possibly be right, that we have done enough archaeology. I've posted more than 2 threads, but 2 main threads and 2 videos that are less than 10 minutes. And I have been asking archaeologist after archaeologist and random other people who agree with them if they will come on with me live and explain to me why I'm wrong. And I keep being told no or ignored. The nicer ones will be like, yeah, I don't really know a lot about maritime archaeology, so I can't do it. And I totally get that. And those are the people that I respect. But there are people who are calling me wrong, and they will not tell me the specifics of why. They just won't. And I have to perceive that as them not being able to engage with it, because those videos use only, I think, exclusively only, if not mostly, archaeological scientific sources, which is mostly what I work in. I don't really do this lost civilization stuff. At least I don't outwardly I don't say it's definitely true. I don't believe it's definitely true, but I believe, and this is, excuse me, a contrast to people like Flint Dibble, that it's possible. And I think it's crazy to say that it's not possible.
And isn't it interesting
that that's an open call out. I'll go live with anybody.
School at all.
Anybody
in fact,
who wants to argue against me.
A very small percentage of people have seen some of these details before. Of course, there are ancient history enthusiasts that watch this channel, that are subscribed. There are other YouTubers. I'm not the first to talk about these things. Although I can tell you that while researching this topic in the last number of weeks, that many of these things, I was blown away. My jaw dropped at seeing the connections between Japan and Easter Island and elsewhere around the world, that this adds up far more than I thought. I was already suspicious and thought that there was a global civilization. I think a lot of people that watch this channel and are enthusiasts for the topic of lost ancient civilizations, they already knew it. But were they aware of the extent of all of this? I don't think it's a coincidence, but that's not to say that we should just start rewriting the textbooks right this second. But at a minimum, what is necessary is a whole new conversation and debate. And these details should at least be presented to the younger generation.
Yeah, it's a good question, Jacob. Like, I'm not fully convinced of this, just so we're clear. Like, I believe my point isn't that it's definitely, like, the alternative explanation is definitely true. My point is that there is enough here that it should be investigated more. And with a lot of these sites, they refuse to investigate them. And Corsetti is extraordinarily reasonable. He's not up in the clouds. Yeah. But they're just refusing to investigate these things that, to me, are clearly at least worth looking into. Even if you don't discover what you're looking for, you might discover something else. I mean, that's how science is supposed to work. And it's why I don't believe, one of the reasons I don't believe archaeology is a science. But it's arbitrary whether it's a science or not, frankly. It's just a point of pride for archaeologists who want to be considered scientists for some reason.
It's currently in school now. Because keep in mind, this stuff is shunned, right? Even people that study this stuff are oblivious to a lot of these same little details, right? So with that being said, there's going to be a whole new generation of academic scholars and archaeologists and historians that it would be great for them to be raised with a more open mind. Because what happens is people are raised into being told one thing, and then they grow up thinking the same thing. And then when they hear something new as an adult, they're like, wait, that's not true. If that was true, I already would have heard about it. But again, it goes back to my point that how many of these details had you never seen or heard of before? And how is it that the people that are saying that, no, it's all fringe, and but they're not, when I say they talk about fringe, the things I shared with you, they're not responding to these details. They just say that transoceanic connection.
Also, Jacob, you're allowed to disagree with me on this channel. In fact, it's quite encouraged to disagree with me. Totally okay. And on my Twitter page. I have the most broad spectrum of followers. People, I've had Zionists and like anti-Semites arguing in my comments.
Was impossible. That only started happening a few hundred years ago, and that's that. You're crazy. You're a pseudo historian or archaeologist. You're fringe if you think otherwise. But they don't share with you the same details while trying to persuade you when they say it.
They don't think they have to persuade you. They think their position as an expert means they can just, you know, speak truth from power. Like it's crazy. Why would archaeology be a science if history is not? Do not use science to test things, but the fields themselves are non-scientific. Well, archaeology does use a lot. It uses a lot of what would be called in reasonably considered scientific methods. There's plenty of like you know, isotope analysis where like they recently discovered the composition of the altar stone in the center of Stonehenge came from Scotland, like that type of thing. And then like forensic anthropology uses a lot of forensic archaeology rather uses a lot of it, like testing bones and archaeobotany. There's plenty of like scientific methods in it, but the conclusions themselves are based on interpretation and humanities research, which is something I want to highlight. I don't really personally care whether it's a science or not. I don't think it means much, but science is not a very well-defined term. It's a very broad term. But me saying it's not a science always gets, it gets archaeologists riled up, and that creates a place to open a dialogue. South Park reference. Yeah. LiDAR. Yeah. They use all these other things, ground penetrating radar, stuff like that. Oops. Okay. Next one. So we're going to look at a map now. We're going to talk about the Richat Structure.
City of Atlantis and the Eye of the Sahara, which in just the last few years has...
Oh, also please like the video if you haven't, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. I got a bunch of videos, weekly podcasts, that type of thing. Not weekly, it's bi-weekly now, to give me more time to work on other stuff.
taken the internet by storm.
Yeah, so this right here is an artist rendition of Atlantis, and this is the Richat structure in the Sahara, which is formerly green.
As this unbelievably bizarre structure just so happens to match a dozen of the most significant similarities to Plato's description.
Archaeology is part of the anthropology department, but I mean, at my college, the University of Connecticut, it was part of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So it's like, it's not a separate college. It's just liberal arts and sciences are together. So you had like, but the department itself is anthropology. In Europe, they do archaeology separate from anthropology, but in North America, it's under the same thing. It's part of anthropology.
Description of the famed lost capital city of Atlantis. But perhaps the only thing stranger than these striking comparisons is the fact that the
concentric circles
itself
is very,
remains
very
a genuine scientific mystery that continues to confound scientists to this day, as this one-of-a-kind geological feature is like no other place found anywhere else on Earth, and has remained essentially hidden and largely unknown within the remote Western Sahara Desert of Mauritania, which only makes its distinctive nature that much more curious when you consider that so few people have still never seen or heard of it before, even including the most curious and inquisitive minds around.
But let me ask you this, Joe, real quick. When you saw my video, was that the very first time you had ever seen this thing before?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And that is the thing, because if nothing else, this extraordinarily unique anomaly.
Yeah, so on Atlantis, Pavle, Avola, I haven't read much of Avola, I don't know why I said that. I haven't read any Avola, but Avola said immigration destroyed Atlantis. At first glance, I would say that probably has a lot to do with his own time, his own interpretation, based on his own culture at the time, but maybe not. Whereas Plato says a disaster befell them after they scorned the gods, which could still mean that immigration destroyed it, or really anything destroyed it, because a lot of these things back then would have been interpreted as the gods scorning them, whether it's a physical, geological type disaster, a climate change disaster, or anything really. Oh yeah, perhaps a meteor strike in shallow sea. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what those look like. I'm not a scientist.
Should be included on the list of natural wonders of the world.
It does look neat.
But nevertheless,
it looks very
when
neat.
You see the new lines of evidence that I'm going to share in this video, it will become exceedingly apparent that the fittingly named Eye of the Sahara is by far the most likely location for the lost capital city of Atlantis. And not only that, these new details will likely make those who previously thought that this site could not possibly be the location of Atlantis think again. So with all of that said, let me start off by sharing something particularly interesting. It is widely known that the ancient Romans were renowned for documenting everything, as the Caesars went to profound extent to accumulate knowledge and information from every location their vast empire ventured. So I have to admit that I was quite surprised to learn of someone by the name of Pomponius Mela, who was the Romans' first geographer dating back to some 2,000 years ago, and had created a sophisticated map of the known world at that time, titled The Habitable World of Pomponia.
Whoa, this is a very, Armenia, Syria, Africa. At this point, Africa really just means North Africa. Europa, Italy, I guess, right here. Scythia, love the Scythians, India, Persia. It's a very abstract map. It's very interesting.
Pomponius Mela.
Scythian Ocean. The Scythicus Oceanus.
Something that up until recently I had never seen or heard of before. And real quick, let's not confuse this map with the ancient Greek historian Herodotus' map of the...
Oh, this one's better. Must be later. When was this guy from? Let's go back here. 43 AD. No, it's much later.
Maya. Something that up until recently I had never seen or heard of before. And real quick, let's not confuse this map with the ancient Greek historian Herodotus' map of the known world of 2,500 years ago.
Jeez, I mean, look at this. This part's very off. They have Iberia very wrong, but it's pretty accurate. You have Tunisia here, with Carthage, and Sardinia and Corsica are pretty good. Sicily's pretty good. I mean, this Italy, Greece, and these are good. And then out of here, it's not as good, but still. Scythia, up here in the basin that is now the Hungarian steppes. I forget what it's called.
Shared in one of my prior videos on this topic. A map that curiously listed Atlantis in the same location of the Richat. However, the original source of this map is a bit of a mystery, as modern historians claim that Herodotus is not known to have ever created an actual map and have thus put its origins into question. So, putting that map aside, let's focus on this verifiably authentic 2,000-year-old map that has also annotated something very interesting in the Western Sahara Desert. First, notice that this map is oriented to the east in its original form, so let me go ahead and flip it to a north-south facing orientation so we can gain our bearing. And the features of Europe, West Asia, and North Africa become apparent. So let's now focus our attention to what is in the northwest region of the Sahara and observe what it annotates here.
I didn't know
Atlantia, or Atlantiae, which more or less appears as Atlanteans, and again, in the same geographical region of the Richat Structure, which, like I've shared in my prior videos, just so happens to coincidentally match so many precise details that Plato described of Atlantis, including that the capital city was famously said to be made up of concentric circles, specifically 3 rings of water and 2 of land, which correctly matches the Richat with water in it, which it certainly did, as I will prove to you with hard scientific data in just a moment. But the circular ring city was also said to have an opening to the sea at the south, which not only matches the southerly opening of the Richat anomaly, but it even has existing evidence of a flow of salt water that is still visible to this day, which, and again, I will prove with hard scientific evidence shortly. But Atlantis was also said to be surrounded by a large rectangular plain, which is another arguable similarity that extends for hundreds of miles on both sides of the Richat. But furthermore, Atlantis was said to be made of black, red, and white color stones, which is another specifically unique similarity that matches the geological nature of the Richat. And speaking of uniquely specific geological features, this next detail that I recently learned of blew me away, as there is English literature from the year 1851 on the preliminary
1851, it's racist, throw it away. Flynn Dibble, probably.
Treatise of Resources of Ancient Mauritania, which describes the country as having gold in considerable quantities. And
right, and this is like where like the Malian Empire spread out a little bit into this. It's like near where Mansa Musa was from.
Even specifically states, and I quote, that it is a well-authenticated fact that previous to the discovery of America, Europe was supplied to a great extent with gold from Mauritania.
What's this citation?
How have I never heard of this before? And get this, Mauritania was so rich in gold that several hundred years ago, a king by the name of Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire, which was a region of Africa that includes modern-day Mauritania, was said to have been the richest man in all of human history. So rich that he far exceeds the richest billionaires alive today.
It's hard
In fact, he owned gold mines which account for more than half of the world's supply of gold today. And by the way, something else you'll find interesting related to that 1851 Treatise of Ancient Mauritanian Resources is that it describes ancient Mauritania of having an abundance of elephant ivory, which is a significant detail considering that Atlantis was said to have numerous elephants on the island. So it's worth mentioning that there is also existing cave art depicting elephants in the area around the Richat as well, as I've shared previously. But I digress, because another highly specific feature of Atlantis was that its center island was described as being geothermal in nature, and that it was said to have hot springs as well as springs of cold, fresh water, which is a reason why some have dismissed the dry, barren Richat structure as a possibility for Atlantis.
Yeah, so I'm with you, Mano, and I'd have to look into the actual reference.
Many will find it very interesting to learn that there is a little-known study of the Richat structure dating back to the late 1990s, which describes the Richat as being a hydrothermal complex.
This is true.
Well,
SW.
hot springs themselves are the very definition of a hydrothermal anomaly. And the fact that there is an actual scientific study corroborating this uniquely specific characteristic is significant in itself, because although the Richat may be a dry, barren place today, we must imagine what a different landscape this region was some 11 to 12,000 years ago at the time of Atlantis. And speaking of 11 to 12,000 years ago, this is the part in the video where things get crazier and will continue to do so through the rest of the video. Because another key aspect is that Atlantis was described as having impressive mountains to the north. So, assuming that the cliffs of the Adra Highlands don't already meet that description, there is likewise a massive mountain chain to the north called the Atlas Mountains, which were aptly named after the first known king of Mauritania, who, get this, just so happens to share the same exact name of the very first king of Atlantis, who was also named Atlas. Gee, what a coincidence.
Killing me, bro.
But it only gets more bizarre from here, because not only was the city of Atlantis described as having mountains located to the north, but also said to have rivers. So get this. Recent scientific studies have confirmed an ancient river called the Tamanrasset that flowed from the Atlas Mountains and winded some 500 kilometers all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, directly in the path of the Eye of the Sahara. And if that isn't fascinating enough, just look at the date of when that river is known to have existed. 11,700 years ago, precisely within the time frame of when Atlantis was said to have been destroyed. Make no mistake.
Wait a minute. 11,700. When did the Younger Dryas end? Yeah. Okay. 12,900 and 11,600 years ago. Okay. They're probably related, right? Because the Younger Dryas would have led into that. But I thought this Sahara was green before then as well. I guess the river could have changed or whatever. All right, back to it.
The entire region of the Sahara looked completely different at that time compared to what we see today. And the next few details that I'm going to share may very well blow your mind. Because, like I've shared in multiple prior videos, there is tremendous evidence of vast water erosion throughout the Sahara Desert, which is so extreme that it can be clearly observed from space via satellite imagery. Make no mistake, this is not wind erosion, and has been confirmed to be catastrophic levels of water erosion by subject matter experts, including even the respected Randall Carlson himself. And the overwhelmingly apparent water striations that rip right through the Richat Structure all the way to the Atlantic Ocean are evident for all who have eyes to see. And upon further study, it looks as if
Minoan, is that true? I thought that it was like a back and forth kind of thing. Like in the intermittent ice age, is like it would have gone back and forth with the changing of the climate. But I'm not sure. It's a scientist thing.
Unimaginably massive force of water had blasted its way from the Mediterranean Sea through North Africa, creating a path that just so happens to be at all the lowest elevational points through the Sahara, just as water would naturally direct itself. And this is the part where things get really nuts, because there is a little known yet unbelievably fascinating scientific study that revealed a gigantic under-ocean seafloor slide off the coast of Mauritania and is referred to as the Mauritanian Slide, and dates back to approximately 11,000 years ago, give or take, and was, get this, believed to have been created by a tsunami. A tsunami that, given the very nature of its shape, would have originated from the east, as you can see from the debris field's widest point, and pushed westward to where the debris field eventually becomes more.
Okay, so this is showing water flow?
More narrow. But not only that, this massive seafloor slide is located directly in front of the Richat's path, as you can see from the reference locations on the study, when compared to the respective locations on planet Earth. And when I say that this seafloor slide is massive, observe the legend in the lower right. From my own estimation, it is 300 kilometers, or nearly 200 miles wide from east to west, and nearly 150 kilometers, or 100 miles wide, when measured from north to south. To put that east-west measurement into perspective, the debris field generated by this tsunami is more than 25% wider than the maximum width of Florida's peninsula. Another comparison is that it's virtually the same distance from Washington, D.C. to New York City.
Oh, wow.
So the big question becomes, what on earth happened to send a biblical-sized tsunami, so to speak, through North Africa in the approximate neighborhood of 11,000 years ago? And let's be real. If the Richat Structure is indeed the actual location for the lost city, The remains of it would be found in the area of this debris field, which, by the way, is stacked layer of debris sediment and is at least a couple thousand meters or more than a mile deep. This entire area needs to be scanned with LiDAR and even drilled for examination. Now, let me keep going because this seafloor slide is not the only...
By the way, this area is called the Sahel. This is a common thing in geography. And when you're talking about geography, we're not just talking about physical geography, but we're talking about like human geography as well. Geography is a very interesting field. Now, the area itself, because of the Sahara, it kind of creates a choke point, right? Like you have Islam in North Africa, and then farther south than that, you have a lot of Christianity because of European colonialism, as well as Christianity mixed with indigenous religions and indigenous religions, sometimes called like folk religions is what we're talking about here. Lots of animism, stuff like that. Yoruba in West Africa is an example of this. Different types of Yoruba. And so this is a very geopolitically erratic. There's lots of wars in this place, and over the past few years, it's kind of popped up a little bit. It's kind of like a location that's a meeting of civilizations. They come in contact here because they're separated by geography in a lot of ways. So because of that, and a lot of these countries are very, very poor. It's hard to get in there and do archaeology. It's sometimes dangerous to get in there and do archaeology.
The only piece of evidence that suggests that the ocean bulldozed its way through the Sahara at the time of Atlantis. As the next
Have you seen the studies that link the Basque, Berbers, and Canary Islanders? I don't think so. I mean, I know stuff about the Basques being pre-Indo-European peoples in Europe. I don't know anything about linking them to the Berbers and Canary Islanders, though. I've never heard that the Basque have stories of being from Atlantis. That's very interesting.
Detail I'm going to share is extremely significant, and I must first preface it by sharing a highly important detail that I've mentioned in prior videos, which is that the last time the Sahara was said to be under the ocean was at the time of the Trans-Saharan Seaway, which is estimated to have existed some 56 to 66 million years ago, essentially all the way back to the time of the dinosaurs. And you can distinguish the regions of the Sahara where this seaway is known to have once flowed.
Okay. I think it's well established the Basque are. You can see it that they're pre-Indo-European peoples. It's in the genetics. Also Sardinia. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. Sardinians are also largely from that. And they have a very, very unique culture. I was about to say strange. I guess you could say that too, but unique is a better word.
You can also clearly observe that this seaway is not annotated to have went west over the Richat. Rather, it went south, which is why I suggest that something else happened, something separate and far more recently that has somehow eluded scientists and researchers. And here is the smoking gun evidence which proves it. Emikusi is the Sahara's largest volcano, reaching a height of 11,300 feet or more than 3,400 meters, and is dated to be 2 million years old. And the last known lava flow occurred at the south end of Emikusi's caldera in the neighborhood of 12,000 years ago, give or take. And this
Holocene volcano, Holocene. Right. The Holocene, that's the Ice Age? No, that's the Pleistocene. Oh, no, that's not Holocene. I didn't think so. Beginning around 11,700 years ago. Why did they say that? Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. Yeah, no. It says it right here. 11,007. The Holocene, the early Holocene is like the end, right after the end of the Younger Dryas. It's the end of the Ice Age. But then this says, and this isn't Jimmy saying this, saying a Holocene volcano. Why did they say that? Whatever.
This is the part that is unbelievably significant.
Later, Yehuda.
Because notice how the volcano is positioned directly along the clear path.
Earthquakes. Why would there be earthquakes in the center of a continental plate? Right? Isn't it the center of a continental plate?
Of catastrophic water erosion, just as we see as the Richat. You can literally see the line of the path that the water took and which clearly eroded and erased portions of that 12,000-year-old lava flow. which means that the flooding would have had to have happened after that volcanic activity. Whether it be 12,000 years ago or 2 million years ago at the birth of this volcano, this is hard evidence that the ocean blasted its way through the Sahara far more recently than 56 to 66 million years ago that's been claimed. And the evidence does not stop there. Because this white blemish within Emikusi's caldera at 11,000 plus feet in elevation is not snow, it's salt. Salt that is said to be the remains of an ancient lake that disappeared just thousands of years ago. And not only that, small aquatic life, including gastropods, which consists of snails, slugs, limpets,
which you can date,
and other small little creatures,
right?
have been found within the caldera and have been radiocarbon dated to some 14 to 15,000 years ago. How did they get there, and where did that salt come from? Because make no mistake, this salt water would obviously had to have come after this volcano's eruption, certainly not before. So let me now take you back to the Richat Structure so I can share one of the most significant details of this video, as it will prove that seawater was indeed inside the Richat at the exact time of Atlantis. Just as I've shared in other videos, all these white blemishes are indeed salt. In fact, the entire region around the Richat in Mauritania itself is known for vast amounts of salt that are mined and exported to this day. And when you consider that all the areas in and around the Richat with these concentrations of salt also happen to be in the areas of the lowest elevation, it seems reasonable to conclude that seawater had once settled and evaporated here. And this next part is the smoking gun evidence, as I have found another little-known study that shares how aquatic life, including mollusks, which, by the way, examples of mollusks include oysters, clams, mussels, squid, and even octopus, existed in the brackish waters within the Richat and have dates ranging from 15,000 to 7,700 years ago, which proves that the Richat was consumed with water at the very time of when Atlantis was said to have been destroyed 11,600 years ago. Let that sink in for a moment, as the implications are massive.
That's the end of the Younger Dryas.
And let me
so
just
where does
say,
that come from?
if everything I've shared so far isn't compelling enough, wait until you hear these next several
He said that
arguments.
earlier in the video, right?
First, consider that the story of Atlantis actually originates from the ancient Egyptians, who claimed that they were colonists and the remaining survivors of a civilization that was destroyed in a cataclysm.
What is the reference
This is where the legend of Atlantis comes from, which is something that most people are not aware of. And so when you consider this next remarkable fact that was only discovered not long ago, is that the Sahara was a lush green tropical landscape at the time of Atlantis. And considering that Atlantis was said to be abundant in exotic fruits and vegetation and had lush hanging gardens, when you piece together the fact that the Sahara was a known lush tropical environment at that time, only further adds to these possible similarities. And listen to this. The Green Sahara existed up until approximately 5,000 years ago, when it shifted to the barren desert we know it for today. However, some estimates state that this transition may have happened as recently as 4,500 years ago, which is a curious time frame as it precisely coincides with the estimated date for when the pyramids of Giza were constructed, some 4,500 years ago. And that brings me to another curious observation, which is that the notable Egyptian Eye of Horus is uncannily similar to the Eye of the Sahara when observed from altitude. Of course, many will consider this comparison to be a stretch. However, it certainly has a thought-provoking resemblance, does it not? But that aside, and although of course, many will consider this comparison to be a stretch. However, it certainly has a thought-provoking resemblance, does it not? But that aside, and although the Sahara Desert initially seems like the least likely place that you'd find the lost city of Atlantis,
forgot about that.
It actually makes a lot of sense when you piece together other key details. For example, Atlantis was said to be busy all day and all night, rich in trade, and with people speaking languages from all over. So ask yourself, does it really make sense to suggest that a city so vastly consisting of travel and trade would be located in the middle of a vast, dangerous ocean? I mean, would other less advanced seafaring civilizations venture out to the middle of the ocean to hit up a local market to trade for ripe fruit, spices, and vegetables? Or is it far more likely that based on all the new scientific data that we have,
we just don't know
the region of North Africa,
it's very hard to do
now know
archaeology
was
there.
connected by a diverse, massive network of rivers, which of course are conducive for travel? Wouldn't that be more feasible? I mean, after all, new studies involving lost human civilizations of the Sahara have concluded exactly that. And something else worth mentioning is that Atlantis was an empire said to be made up of 10 kingdoms, and I would not be surprised if any of the other 9 that made up this empire would be found in the island chains found in this region, including the submerged islands such as the Azores. I am simply focusing on the capital city, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, and the Eye of the Sahara is the one location that matches that highly specific characteristic, and nearly a dozen others. Heck, even the names are still the same. Now, if everything I've shared so far isn't compelling enough, the next few details will hit the nail into the coffin that the Eye of the Sahara is by far the most likely location for the lost capital city of Atlantis. Because many have argued that since the Richat structure is a, quote, natural formation, it could not possibly be the location since, after all, Atlantis was created by the god Poseidon. But when you consider that Poseidon was the god of the sea, water, horses, and earthquakes, the Greek word Poseidon itself translates to, quote, husband of the earth or lord of the earth. It seems to me that this is a lost in translation phrase that is meant to describe what we call today Mother Nature, which, if you ask me, would of
Says here the Richat structure is 25 miles in diameter.
course make the most sense. But besides that,
The outer
we
circles.
also know that humans have built upon the most unique natural formation since the beginning of time and still do to this day. Furthermore, people will also say that Plato stated that Atlantis was located, quote, west of the Pillars of Hercules, which we now know today as the Strait of Gibraltar, which is why many suggest that Atlantis would most likely be found in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. However, Plato did not say west. He actually said in front of. And the first thing you should know is that when you exit the Strait of Gibraltar, the current takes you directly south towards the Richat. But furthermore, assuming that a distant past civilization even had adequate seafaring vessels that could survive the open oceans.
Yeah, you hardly notice the shape standing in it. The guys from Top Gear, they went to it, and they drove up to it, and they were like, "Well, there's nothing here. What is it?" And then they showed the pictures zooming out. It was a really cool shot. That wasn't on Top Gear. That was on the American version that I think is canceled after a bunch of seasons now.
You had essentially 3 choices of travel when leaving the straits. You either follow the coast to the right, follow the coast to the left, or go straight into the unknown, endless ocean horizon at your own peril. So here is something interesting to think about. If you traveled along the coast with Africa to the left, you would journey west-southwest for more than 1,200 miles before rounding Africa's Western Sahara coastline. To put that distance into perspective, that is equivalent from New York City to Lincoln, Nebraska. That is no little trip. I point that out because it's not unreasonable to say that the Richat structure is in front of the straits when you travel by boat. But regardless, Plato never said west. And by the way, another detail people get caught up in is that Plato stated that Atlantis sank beneath the waves, which is why many have long assumed that Atlantis would be at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. However, Plato also described that the destructed area of Atlantis following the cataclysm consisted of reeds of grass, and that the area was no longer navigable by ship as it was blocked by a barrier of mud. Well, that does not indicate anything about being at the bottom of the ocean. Rather, he is essentially describing reed-filled salt marshes that are known to exist in shallow coastal regions. And although the Richat is now some 1,200 feet above sea level, we know that that, of course, was not always the case, considering that the sea life once existed in the Richat.
Wait, is he connecting it to Indo-Europeans? When did he do that?
Some 11 to 12,000 years ago. But this is why it is worth discussing the geological phenomenon known as isostatic response, or glacial isostatic adjustment, which describes that when ice melts, the significant reduction in weight causes the land to lift back up, but subsequently causes land in other areas to decrease, which is the likely explanation for the sunken Azore Islands, as it's been suggested that the melted North American ice shelf caused that land to lift and subsequently caused the land in the Atlantic Ocean to sink. But if that is indeed the case, would that not potentially have caused North Africa to lift? I don't know. Another enthralling detail that goes along these lines is to note that the antipode of the Richat structure today, and by the way, if you're not familiar, an antipode is a location that is directly opposite of another location on our globe. So get this. The antipode of Mauritania is Zealandia, a scientifically confirmed sunken continent that was only discovered in 2017. And considering that many have theorized that what happens on one side of the Earth could potentially affect the location directly on the other side, this detail is worthy of discussion. And by the way, let me give a quick shout out to my great friend Nikki of the Nikkiana Jones YouTube podcast channel for sharing this highly thought-provoking detail with me. Definitely go to her channel and hit the subscribe.
Dude, I love that Wandering Wolf, who's another friend of me, of Illegitimate Scholar. I don't think I think I forgot. No, I knew that his name was Michael Collins, who's also like he was an Irish revolutionary. Yeah, that scumbag Winston Churchill put a bounty on his head before realizing it wasn't going to work.
Button, as she is completely awesome. Her personality and inquisitive mindset are infectious, and I know that you'll just love her. Now, one last final yet important argument to be made related to the Richat Atlantis theory is that many will say that the measurements provided by Plato for the size of the capital city make the Richat far too large. However, I disagree and would argue that the true measurements would surely have been lost in translation over the course of some 12,000 years and through the numerous changes of language that would have, of course, occurred during the passing of that prolonged time. I mean, it's not like anyone today speaks Latin, which was once a common language, and heck, even the modern English language itself is only 500 years old and derives from Old English, which is quite a bit different, and in that in itself is only 1,500 years old. Make no mistake, languages are constantly changing, and keeping up with measurements, I would argue, could be a very difficult challenge, especially over 12,000 years. And Solon went out of his way to describe this issue of interpretation when he stated that he would endeavor to the best of his ability to...
If you read Genesis, like, those numbers are clearly not literal unless you believe in, like, ancient alien theory. Some sort of like thing keeping kings alive for 12,000 years or whatever. Latin is probably the worst example since it's a mortal language now. Yeah, but that's the exception, right? That's not the rule. But yes, it is not a good example for something like that happening.
Describe the specifics of Atlantis. And considering that Atlantis was said to be busy all day and all night, it's fair to say that the local population would have had to have been in the
New
millions,
York of North Africa,
just as we find in other busy cities throughout the world today. So the city of Atlantis would have had to have been large enough to inhabit a sizable population. I mean, let's note that modern metropolitan areas are very comparable to the size of the Richat.
Actually, I'm going to look up how...
the Paris metro area is well over 20 miles from one side to the other. And the same can be said for modern-day Cairo. The reality is that lost in translation is a very real thing, because even the ancient Greek word used by Plato to use and describe the word island of Atlantis was the word Nessos, which when you research the origins of that word, you find that it has 5 different translations, which include not just the word island, but
etymology.
Promontory, peninsula, coast, and even describes land within a continent that is surrounded by lakes, rivers, or streams, which would be a completely appropriate word to describe the Richat structure at that time. When you add all of these details that I've shared throughout this video together, I'd say that the Pomponius Mea map is probably the least compelling part, as it may just be talking about the Atlas people who lived under the ancient Mauritanian king of the same name. At least that's how some will come to dismiss this. But then again, it seems to me that the very name Atlas was carried down and reused, just as people do with names today. All I know is that the numerous details shared in this video are too astounding to be ignored. And Atlantis or not, whether it ever existed or whether or not the Richat structure would be the long-lost location, if nothing else, like I said earlier, the Richat structure should be listed on Natural Wonders of the World. And not only that, the very nature of the Sahara Desert, having clear evidence that the ocean blasted over it far more recently than 56 to 66 million years ago, should be a topic that is front and center among researchers, scientists, climate scientists, and everybody. Geologists, this is significant. So I know some people dismiss the possibility of Atlantis and ridicule the Richat theory. Great. But like, we need to talk about the science aspect of this and what the heck happened to the Sahara Desert. That being said, I'm going to close this up. Leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe. But my name is Jimmy Corsetti. My channel is called Bright Insight, and stay tuned for many more videos to come.
All right. Which one are we going to do now? What do you guys want to see? There's a lot on Bright Insight we can do. I've got a few saved here. Do we want to get into anybody have any suggestions? If we want to get into the modern stuff, we can do Gunang Padang. We can do, it's another one, another Lost Civilizations broadly one. I don't know specifically what he's talking about. Speaking of islands, that makes me wonder if Lemuria was ever going to be brought back to mainstream. What is Lemuria? I don't remember. I might not have ever heard of this. Moria. Oh, a continent proposed in 1864, theorized to have sunk beneath the Indian Ocean. Theory was discredited with the discovery of plate tectonics. The hypothesis was proposed as an explanation for the presence of lemur fossils on Madagascar in the Indian subcontinent, but not in continental Africa, the Middle East. I don't know. I might look into that later. Okay. We can also do some Gobekli Tepe, and then I do want to eventually, we don't necessarily have to do it now, but the Archaeology is Dead one. I haven't actually watched this one yet. This is a recent one from our boy here. All right, well, I'll just pick one. Just do this one. I recently learned that Academia was the name of a grave in Athens where Plato taught his students. A grove, not grave. Really? I didn't know that's where the root was. That's interesting. Yeah, I think Plato would be pretty horrified by how academics think today, who they are. But that is my speculation. Let's see.
Examples which demonstrate that ancient human civilizations were older and significantly more advanced than we were taught in school. And not only that, I will share multiple examples which overwhelmingly suggest that ancient human civilizations were globally connected across vast oceans and continents, which is simply not supposed to have been possible thousands of years ago. However, the debate of whether a lost ancient advanced civilization existed and was ultimately destroyed in a cataclysm remains at an all-time high. And not long ago, legendary author Graham Hancock engaged in a debate with archaeologist and university professor Dr. Flint Dibble on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Why would you call him doctor?
And this epic 4.5-hour-long debate has reignited heated argument between archaeologists and alternative historians about just how old and advanced ancient civilizations actually were.
Put me in the video, Jimmy.
Let me just go ahead and dive right into this with a few specific examples that were discussed in that debate, which illustrate just how divided the two sides of the conversation are. The Yonaguni Monument of Japan is...
Yeah, dude, I mean, this thing, like the fact, it looks like a quarry to me. But like the fact that Flint Dibble denied outright that this could be man-made is just so crazy to me.
Undoubtedly one of the most bizarre underwater stone features on Earth.
I'm sure there are some answers down there in the
Vatican.
And
straight lines take people by surprise.
Dude, look at this. Flint Dibble insisted that this was man-made. I don't understand how. How can you look at this? Or I'm sorry, insisted that this was not man-made. Like, maybe not. I've never seen anything like this. Anything natural like this in my entire life. There's so many straight lines. It just doesn't make any sense. And like somebody tried to point out to me like the hexagonal stones, and it's like, yeah, that's a different thing, right? And you can find those in multiple places. We understand how those came about. There's no natural explanation for where this comes from. There's no other locations either.
The first time they see it. Just observe the highly unusual nature of this structure, which, by the way, is located close to the shoreline, yet reaches a depth of approximately 100 feet. And this remarkable structure consists of a series of step-like ledges that are so striking, it's hard to imagine that it could be a natural formation. In fact, look at the various...
No, I haven't heard anything about Bimini Road recently, but like that, those large stones straight, like that is crazy. Also, we should be clear about Bimini Road. It's called Bimini Road, but we don't necessarily know that it was a road. That's just what it's called. It depends on what the stone is made of, but I don't think anyone addresses that I've heard. They just want to ignore it. Like that's one of the biggest complaints that I have is that like they could look into this stuff to confirm it's not what people think it is, but they don't. And I get that this kind of stuff is expensive, but wouldn't it be huge for somebody to disprove this? Why does no one care to do it? Could it be a sunken human city? I mean, there could be a city around it, right? Like, but like, why this doesn't like read to me as a city. It's you know what I mean? Like it's right angles and stuff. It looks like the stones were cut, but not necessarily for a city. It could be related to a city, but it looks human made is what I think.
Nuanced details found throughout this incredible site.
It's not like it's impossible.
The
Yeah, look at this. Come on, man. This right here, like this clear path here with what looks like steps. How could this be created naturally?
Go beyond the series of step-like formations. In fact, notice the nature of what appears to be cut blocks that were seemingly, or at least appear to be, stacked on top of each other.
Dude, what
and
is that?
As you look at various other photos of this impressive site, also note the sheer size and magnitude of it when compared to people scuba diving around it. Now, also notice
Come on,
this
look at that image. It's not natural. How could it be?
Square-like formation that appears to have been cut in half. Is this really the product of natural oceanic tidal erosion?
No, I'm not
like I
jumping to that
said,
conclusion
this site
either.
is truly one of a kind, and unlike anything we see anywhere else on the planet, which, suffice to say, appears to be anything but natural, leading many people to believe that it was cut and carved by the hand of man, which is why Graham Hancock and many others, including myself, suggest that it very well could be lost remnants of ancient human stonework, which, by the way, you should know, this site was above water during the last ice age more than 12,000 years ago, when the Earth's sea levels were significantly lower, which would have made it fully possible for ancient humans to shape it into the formation we see today.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. It depends on the isostatic rebound or whatever it's called. I don't remember if I got the right term, but 100 feet, I think, yeah, after the Younger Dryas, the Younger Dryas is the end of the Ice Age. The end of the last Ice Age, rather. So, yeah, that would suggest that if it's man-made, it would have to be, unless it was above water, depending on the sea level at the time. But I think it would almost definitely mean that it would have to be from the Ice Age. I heard a rumor that so Gobekli Tepe was being shut down. Digging's supposed to stop. No, so they've said, we're going to look at some videos later from Jimmy Corsetti on that. They've said that it is like less. It's being excavated less. The excavations have slowed. There's been no measurable progress in like 7 years. It's been a massive fight on Twitter between like people like me and Jimmy Corsetti and Luke Caverns, who was in the chat earlier, Wandering Wolf. I think he's participated a little bit in this. And the archaeologists are like defending this, but we'll watch a video on that later. But it's not stopped. It's not being shut down. It's actually open to the public in general. They've talked about banning people from the site, unfortunately, banning people from the country, actually. But no, it's not being shut down. But the excavations are being slowed. They've been slowed.
Something we should consider, which is its remarkably uncanny appearance that's similar to modern stone quarries we see throughout the world today.
Okay, so now he's talking about the quarries.
Take a moment to observe some varying side-by-side comparisons. Like I always say, look and think for yourself. However, this is where...
So, Pavle, they could have went on boats. There's evidence of seafaring. I went over this in a video a few months ago. It's on the channel. There was evidence of boats even in like Melanesia and Indonesia like 30, 40, 50,000 years ago. And they know that based on what I was talking about earlier, like an hour ago, like more than that, at the very beginning of the video, the isotopes and I think isotopes, but the geological markers in I want to say obsidian from some of these islands that they then find artifacts from on other islands that show that they were going over 50 miles on boats that they have no like material reference for. There's nothing in the archaeological record that would explain them being able to do this, but they know that they did. because the sea levels were higher. And so they, at the time, like they were disconnected, but two separate islands, but they were still able to move these goods from one of these islands to another one. Yeah, Thor Heyerdahl's, he did make like a raft that they went on. That was very early on. There was actually somebody who made a Viking ship. This happened like last week. There was an archaeologist who, an archaeologist who died on a boat off the coast of Norway. They were doing experimental archaeology. Very sad story. They had worse weather than they expected, and it capsized. And a 29-year-old American woman who was an archaeologist died in that. So, till Valhalla.
Really stark difference in opinions comes in as the skeptics, including Flint Dibble, state that there is no evidence that this structure is anything other than natural. That is simply a fluke form of unusual natural erosion created by the tides of the ocean. But I find that argument intriguing because it begs the question: if this is indeed a product of natural erosion, then why don't we see examples anywhere else on Earth that is even remotely similar to this? I mean, just consider that there are over 2.5 million kilometers of aggregate coastline that make up our 7 continents and all the shorelines of all the islands existing around the world combined. That's more than 1.5 million miles of shoreline. Yet the site of Yonaguni only makes up a few hundred meters of shoreline. And by the way, look at it on both sides through this map depiction. The blasting of the ocean would have been hitting both sides and even on the side of it. So again, that doesn't make sense for being a natural feature of erosion. And again, if academics are to claim that this is simply a natural formation, then why can't they provide just one example from just one other place on Earth that is even remotely similar to Yonaguni? I mean, after all, we've all seen spectacular seashore cliffs from all over the world and various examples of natural erosional processes created by the tide and the wind.
Those are cliffs of Dover.
And nothing compares to the dramatic step-like formation we see at Yonaguni. In fact, there's really no comparison. Tidal forces simply do not form such striking step-like patterns, which I think we all understand because, again, we would have seen it elsewhere. So, not to mention that all the other nuanced formations around this site besides the step-like patterns, which certainly catch the eye. Are we really going to say that all of these various examples were created through natural erosion? It seems to me that if nothing else, the site of Yonaguni warrants further study with an archaeological lens. And honestly, this one example may sum up the essence of that entire debate. But let me give you just one more thought-provoking example, which...
Yeah, Fihart on Doggerland, which is, confirm that Doggerland is the area between, like, it's the extended British Isles, right? I don't even like to use the term British Isles, but, like, around the British Isles into, like, the Netherlands. That's what you're talking about, right? I'm aware a little bit of it. There hasn't been that much. It's actually, like, a huge area. Well, there hasn't been that much from, like, the Ice Age, which is something I looked into while I was researching Flint Dibble's stuff, his claims, and finding them to be lacking. But yes, a little bit.
Which will articulate or at least illustrate what I'm trying to say when I say the essence of the debate. The site of Gunang Padang in Indonesia was an early topic of discussion during their conversation.
I should say that I looked into this before. The article on this that Graham Hancock shared with the guy was very much not in the format that I was familiar with. It's not in the format of a lot of Western archaeology. It was very confusing to me. And I had originally kind of written this piece off, and I've since looked a little bit. I might have to revisit it just to see if it's worth looking into anymore. But I had some issues with the claims that they were making in the article themselves. But I watched Ancient Apocalypse again, and the way they did it there was a little bit different. But we'll probably watch a video on that from Jimmy Corsetti. I'm gonna be doing this for at least another hour, maybe 2, as long as people are still watching.
And this profound hilltop was geoengineered into a pyramidal-like structure of terraces and was designed using the natural volcanic rock that surrounds the area. It couldn't be more clear that the hand of man altered this site, which is certainly agreed upon by academics and the archaeological community. However, the debate involves the startling implication that it may be as much as 24 to 27,000 years old, which would completely alter our understanding of human history, as this type of project would far exceed the alleged capabilities of prehistoric civilizations. So let me just cut to the chase. Graham Hancock visited this site multiple times, including for his hit Netflix show Ancient Apocalypse, where he showcased the use of ground penetrating radar that identified a potential subterranean tunnel connecting to a chamber which has been dated to 27,000 years old.
Okay, so the issue that I had was that they tested some of this and they see that, but at the same time, like, I didn't find it convincing that these were like that these were definitely man-made. But I now think it's at least worth looking into. And I think at some point I remember somebody claiming that it would like destroy the site, but it wouldn't. It wouldn't destroy it at all. You would cut in and get a sample, but whatever. They don't want to. They're insisting that it's just not.
Could this be a man-made feature within the structure centered at the heart of this mysterious and incredibly old site, or just some natural anomaly? Well, on one hand, Flint Dibble argues that this alleged chamber is not provable evidence of ancient human activity, and on the other hand, you have Graham Hancock stressing that the possibility should be considered, and this site requires a full excavation to find out the answer, especially considering how enormous the implications are. I mean, just imagine what could be waiting to be discovered inside a 27,000-year-old pyramid chamber. So let's be clear. Is there a void consisting of
There's one thing I want to show here, if we're going to be talking about Gunang Padang in this video. What's it called? Sundaland is what it's called. Yeah. So when we're looking at the Sahul, which is this area here, I've looked into their archaeology quite a bit. There's lots of stuff. Australia, like, it seems they have different biases, right? Australian archaeology is very interesting. I've done a video before where we went over an Australian archaeologist who kind of exposed Margaret Mead, who is a very famous cultural anthropologist from the United States, and her the issues with the work that she did, in cultural anthropologist, not archaeologist. I don't remember what I just said, but Australian archaeology, which does a lot of work in New Guinea over in the Sahul, which is here we go, Sunda and Sahul. Why is that low resolution though? Here we go. They do a lot of work over here in these areas. The Australian archaeologists do. A lot of work on maritime stuff. This is I just referenced this earlier when I was talking about the evidence of them moving between islands, when you found markers of the materials that were from other islands that show that these early humans 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years ago were going between these islands. They would have had to be traveling on boats. Of course, there's evident, like, people will bring up the idea that maybe they just, floated over, but there's like a bunch of different examples of this. So it's not like it implies trade routes pretty deliberately. Like, it's pretty good evidence of it. But what you see in the grayed out, the grayed out land here, the slightly darker color than the land today. The land today is in the lighter tan color, and the darker tan is what it would have looked like, I think, at the last glacial maximum when the sea levels were much lower. These were much larger and connected land masses. Like this is the country of Indonesia, as well as Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand's up here, Southeast Asia. These were much larger land masses. So there could possibly be stuff under here, and there could be like a lost Southeast Asian civilization. And the Gunang Padang, I forget what island it's on. Was it on Java? I don't remember if he says that, but is what we're talking about. This is the era, Sundaland. Here. Okay. What video were we on? Here we go.
A possible tunnel and chamber underneath the known ancient ruins at this site, which have been identified through scientific measurements, i.e. ground penetrating radar. Yes. Has this potential subterranean tunnel and chamber been excavated or even explored?
Oh,
No,
I
it
had
has
it on the
not.
screen, the walls.
Okay, enough discussion. Let's drill a hole, send a camera down, and find out exactly what it is. And encouraging further study and exploration is exactly what Graham Hancock has been advocating for. But to be honest, the response to the debate, now that it's over, has been quite interesting, as various academics and archaeologists have declared total victory that Graham Hancock failed to show definitive proof of a lost ancient advanced civilization. However, what I witnessed was that Flint Dibble didn't answer or otherwise dodged various consequential questions.
He
and
did.
so
He
much of
kept
Graham
doing
Hancock's
it.
work that he shared over 3 decades wasn't even touched on during the debate. And the reality is that to have a effective debate, you need a good dance partner. And the nature of this conversation did not allow the most interesting details
and I've shown that
to come
in
out.
black and white.
So that's exactly what I'm going to share right now. What I consider to be compelling examples which show that ancient human civilizations were older, more advanced, and globally connected, which is the complete opposite of what we were taught in school. Now, with that said, we were all, of course, taught that transoceanic sea travel wasn't possible until the year 1492 when Christopher Columbus sailed the Atlantic Ocean to the so-called New World. They still teach this erroneous fact today, but what I am going to show you now is arguably the most compelling example of a lost, ancient, globally connected civilization, but also happens
Jody,
to be by far
really,
the most controversial.
Yeah, so large structure off Cuba coast. I think that research is actually like really old and just like popped back up recently. They've talked about it. I'll look that up in another tab while we're doing this.
Something that virtually no one discusses and I have not shared in any of my prior videos. But let me quickly mention the sponsor of this video. We've all seen how crazy and uncertain the world has become, which is why all of us should be taking steps to be
wellness company,
prepared.
Jimmy
and I highly
Corsetti. Check it
recommend
out
the
if you
purchasing
want.
of an code Bright Insight today to receive $30 off plus free shipping. With that said, back to the video. So as I was just saying, what is arguably the most compelling example of a lost, ancient, globally connected civilization, and which
the swastika is an ancient symbol, very ancient symbol found in myriad different cultures. If you bring it up, you ask about it, people just accuse you of being a mid-century German or something, which is ridiculous because the symbol was appropriated by the mid-century Germans, which I don't think I'm even allowed to say the word on YouTube. And it has a much longer history. I mean, look at these: Navajo, Korea, Iran, Japan, Aztec. Like it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. And there's things about it. What? Russia? What is that? Is that the Soviet Union? That's strange. It's like some people, and I think the most likely theory is that this has something to do with the rotation of the stars. A lot of people say it has to do with the Big Dipper rotating around the North Star, that type of thing.
which just so happens to be the most controversial, is this symbol here. We all know its name, and we certainly all know the people who used it. However, many people are not aware that this is a prehistoric symbol that dates back nearly 10,000 years.
It gets like, I don't know where this idea came from that it's like an Indian symbol, because yeah, they had it in India, but they had it in everywhere else in the entire world. Where you were born, the Podhale rifleman who fought the Germans in World War II
Years, and is inexplicably found on 5 continents around the world. Whether it be in the mountains of Armenia, estimated between 7 to 10,000 years ago, to prehistoric Iran 7,000 years ago, to ancient Iraq 6,000 years ago, to ancient Egypt at least 3,000 years ago, even the ancient Greeks dating back over 2,500 years, to Ghana and West Africa as well as Ethiopia, to even England several hundred years ago. In fact, it has even been found as far away as the remote island of Bali 1,000 years ago. And I recently learned that it's even been found in South America within ancient Peru. But perhaps the most mystifying example is that it has been found in the indigenous Native American tribes of North America as far back as 2,200 years ago by the Hopewell Mound people in the modern state of Ohio. In fact, numerous other Native American tribes, including the Pima Indians, the Navajo, and the Yavapai Indians of the American Southwest, all use this symbol, and this is just a few examples. but it had even been used by tribes as far away as Alaska. How is it possible that this symbol was used in prehistoric times across 5 continents around the world and in some of the most remote places imaginable? I do not think for a second that the use of this highly specific symbol is a coincidence. In fact, I think that it is evidence of an ancient and powerful civilization that once traveled the globe many thousands of years ago, and the symbol itself is a surviving relic of a once profound civilization that was passed down over many millennia, but was regrettably bastardized and reappropriated by evil people to the point that we can't even discuss it today. So putting aside whatever motives and ideology were used for choosing this symbol more recently, the fact that it somehow exists across the world thousands of years before transoceanic sea travel was thought to be possible raises serious questions. This is a lost ancient mystery. And I should mention that what I shared were just a few examples, as this symbol has been found in India, China, and many different countries in Europe, literally all over the world. And again, putting modern evil motives and ideology aside, many are surprised to learn of the bizarre fact that they were obsessed with ancient archaeology. Believe it or not, the fictional Indiana Jones movies were based on some truths, and that these people searched for various ancient artifacts, including the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, and even Thor's hammer, which makes you wonder why they would allocate so many resources to do so. I do not know what the answer is to that question, but it is rather fascinating, as this mystery has been seemingly hiding in plain sight. Again, few are aware of just how old and widespread this symbol is, and like I said, almost nobody discusses it. And this is a topic that I will continue to further research, but let me move forward with other interesting examples, such as the fact that pyramids are found on 4 continents around the world. From, of course, Egypt and Africa to Cambodia in Asia, as well as even China. And of course, the various pyramids of Mesoamerica we're all familiar with. But many are surprised to learn that even the ancient Greeks had a pyramid. No, I do not think that building pyramids is simply a natural progression of human ingenuity. Many will say that it's the most simple of structures to create and that all you have to do is stack blocks on top of the others in ascending pattern and voila, a simple pyramid is born. But to that, I totally disagree, as there is nothing instinctual or primitive about quarrying massive multi-ton stones, cutting and then lifting and stacking them hundreds of feet above the ground. And although many of the pyramids found around the globe were created thousands of years apart, I do think that they are evidence of a once global connection. Not necessarily a global civilization, but a connection that illustrates that humans had traversed the continents and communicated or traded knowledge or skill sets with each other at some point in the distant past, which brings me to the profound mystery of ancient polygonal stonework, which I have of course discussed in detail in prior videos. As there are polygonal stones in Egypt found at numerous sites throughout the country, there are an abundance of polygonal stones found all the way over in Peru, which, by the way, were done with such unbelievable precision you'd almost think they were cut with lasers. And although I am not actually suggesting that, but they were clearly achieved with a method that far exceeds the alleged base copper tooling. I mean, this is an evidence of a technology that we don't know about in itself. And speaking of Egypt and Peru, let's not forget the similarity of the so-called nubs, which many refer to as lifting bosses. Whatever their purpose was, it seems to me that they are so similar in nature that it's not a coincidence, especially considering that they were found on 4 continents around the world respectively. And while I'm at it, let me remind you that polygonal stone walls have been found all over the world, throughout various countries in Europe, including Italy. You'll see them in a number of different locations, as well as in Greece, as well as in Turkey, which is of course considered Asia today. But again, I have shared these examples before, but when you compare side-by-side examples, it becomes obvious that this goes beyond mere coincidence. And by the way, many are surprised to learn that Japan has incredible polygonal stonework as well. I had the great pleasure of visiting this amazing country just a few months ago and was blown away at the magnitude of many of these relics and the polygonal shape that they are comprised of. Which reminds me, compare the similarities of these 2 stone sarcophagus between Egypt and Japan. I've shared this example across social media, and it is hotly debated, but if you want to know my opinion, I think that this is a profound example of an unknown cross-cultural connection between the
Yeah.
continents.
So
I mean,
he's
just look how
rehashing
similar
his
they
old
are.
video. The other one we watched was
Now,
like 4 years
one
ago.
other example I want to briefly
like more
mention
recent.
is what's referred to as the ancient equator theory, which correlates that many of the world's most significant ancient sites just so happen to align perfectly, including from Easter Island all the way over to Machu Picchu in South America, to the Giza pyramids of Egypt, to
Whoa.
Petra in Jordan, the Persepolis in Iran,
There could be some
Mohenjo-Daro in
geological
Pakistan,
reason
and
for this.
all the way over to Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Others have suggested that these sites exist on what was once an ancient equator that has since shifted, and this is something that I will discuss in detail in an upcoming video involving ancient
make sense,
catastrophic pole shifts. Now, what I've shared so far are just a few examples that
would they be along
illustrate the potential that
equator?
ancient human civilizations were globally connected across vast oceans and continents. But the reality is that ancients were undoubtedly far more advanced than we were led to believe. And I would argue that the movement of massive megalithic stones is a key piece of evidence. Last September, I was able to check something off my bucket list, which was to travel to the mysterious site of Baalbek in Lebanon, and what I witnessed blew my mind. And I have to say that I think that this is arguably the best example of a lost ancient advanced civilization. There is so much to say and share, so this will be the sole topic of my very next video, as it's so profound that it requires an entire video in itself. But to give you something to think about, notice that you will also find examples of this symbol all over the
Vincenzo spaghetti. Yeah, Vincenzo. That is the theory that I've seen from the Hungarian guy that I was talking about earlier. I'm forgetting Corsetti, I think his name is.
This enigmatic site. I find that interesting. But moreover,
Marcel
the ruins of
Corsetti.
Baalbek goes far beyond the known
That's right.
capabilities of the ancients. For example, the so-called trilithon stones are comprised of 3 individual 900-ton stones that were transported before being lifted and perfectly stacked approximately 23 feet off the ground. How this was done is a mystery, as nothing was left behind to describe who did this, how, or even when. No, I do not believe the Romans are responsible for this, as has been erroneously claimed, and I will lay out a compelling presentation in my next video, and you can formulate your own opinion. But for the point of this video, and in the context of working with supermassive stones, I will say that the 1,000 metric ton Ramesseum statue of Luxor, Egypt is definitive proof of a lost technological capability.
Yeah, so this is a good point here. If I remember correctly, these large stones were common in early Bronze Age, but by the late Bronze Age, they switched to mud brick walls, most likely because it was much easier to build. And this idea of over time, things getting, I mean, if you look at it within a local area, things getting less complicated, less sophisticated over time, could be a locally created thing, but I've seen or locally relevant thing, but I've seen evidence of like the more ancient megalithic structures being more complicated. I don't remember the specifics than later ones, which would suggest, you know, something maybe a little bit more of a civilizational decline past the local area and in more broadly a societal decline, which of course would apply to the Bronze Age.
This statue was carved from one single piece of granite stone and of course is now destroyed, which is a bizarre mystery in of itself. But while it was intact, it weighed a staggering 2.2 million pounds and was inexplicably transported some 170 miles. Let's be clear, there is nothing that the known dynastic Egyptians did that even remotely compares to this. The only example we have of them moving a statue is this example here, which was briefly mentioned during the Flint-Dibble-Graham Hancock debate.
Okay, and this was a thing in the Flint-Dibble, Graham Hancock, Joe Rogan episode. Like, just like, it's very possible that this was somebody claiming to, like, this was a pharaoh trying to claim that he had built the pyramids and showing how they possibly built them. This isn't necessarily hard evidence, but they've used this to date the pyramids. And I think it's very possible the pyramids are older than they've been claimed to be. And Jimmy Corsetti has talked about this before. Yeah, so I don't know, man. I don't know. And actually they've really brushed right over this, but Flint Dibble, I believe he said in the JRE episode, I'm going to be looking into this later, but he said that they date the Sphinx based on the pyramid. Based on the Pyramid of Giza that's next to it, and that just doesn't work, man. They were also talking about dating it based on based on sediment that they found in the cracks of the stones, but that also doesn't necessarily imply that that's from the time they were built. There's all this stuff. We don't really know how old they are. They claim they know, and they provide evidence for that, and the evidence is it's a good argument, but it's not the only argument. It's just not.
But what's worth mentioning is that this statue is a mere 58 metric tons and was only moved 9 miles or 15 kilometers. And to do so, they dragged it on a wooden sledge with approximately 172
Allegedly.
men. But mind you, this statue is 17 times lighter than the 1,000-ton Ramesseum statue. Are we really going to pretend that primitive wooden sleds are infinitely scalable? Because show me a primitive wooden sled that could support 2.2 million pounds and over hundreds of miles. Good luck. How many ropes would you need? How long would they be? And how many people would you need to do it? And again, what wood would not splinter and shatter with that type of weight? And keep in mind that this one statue is equivalent to the weight of nearly 16 Abrams tanks. It literally ranks among the heaviest objects transported in all of human history. In fact, this may sound like a funny comparison, but 1,000 metric tons is equivalent to over 22,000 individual 100-pound dumbbells that you see at the gym, and you probably can't even lift one of them. But I happened to snap this photo while working out at my own gym, which inspired this comparison. Again, this one statue equates to over 22,000 individual 100-pound dumbbells, and that was moved over hundreds of miles. To further the comparisons, though, we must compare what our modern capabilities are today to fully appreciate what an enormous undertaking this was. So let me take a moment to acknowledge some of the world's largest and most powerful heavy equipment our modern civilization has developed. What you're seeing here is the world's largest ultra-class haul truck ever created. The Belaz 75710 is a sheer marvel of engineering. So large that you must travel up 2 flights of stairs to reach the cockpit. In fact, the tires themselves are 13.25 feet in diameter, which is virtually equivalent to the height of a large African bull elephant. And this truck has 8 of these tires.
Awesome.
And this is where things get wild, as despite having the highest payload capacity on Earth at 496 tons, that is still only half the weight of the 1,000 metric ton Ramesseum statue. In other words, you would need 2 of these trucks to move it. And while I'm at it, let me give you one more fun example. The Komatsu PC8000 is one of the world's most powerful heavy excavators. Just compare the size of its bucket to people. Enormous. Yet, its bucket has a max lifting capacity of just 100 tons, which is only 1/10 the weight of the Ramesseum statue. And although you certainly would not use an excavator to lift and transport a large object, it's simply not what it was designed for, but I use this comparison to illustrate just how insanely heavy a 1,000 metric tons statue actually is, especially when you compare it to some of the largest hydraulic equipment our modern civilization has today. So how would we move something of this weight? Well, as I've shared before, we must consider the example of the 340-ton stone that was
So I heard that the Egyptians would create artificial rivers by irrigating the Nile to float the stones needed for the pyramid to their destination. That's a plausible idea for the stones, but the statue is much larger. I don't know. That's different.
Transported to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in 2012, which was cited as the largest project of its kind since the Egyptians built the pyramids. And to move this one stone over 106 miles, they had to custom build a 260-foot long, 32-foot wide, 196-wheeled trailer truck around the stone itself. And it traveled at 4 miles an hour, it took 11 nights, and costed a whopping $10 million, and took an entire year of planning. And this one stone is just 1/3 the weight of that 1,000-ton Ramesseum statue. In other words, how the Egyptians managed to do this with primitive methods is totally inexplicable. The mystery is real, and the ancients were undoubtedly more advanced than we were led to believe, and it's there for all who have eyes to see. And speaking of incredible feats accomplished by the ancients, here is another highly thought-provoking example. Let's go all the way over to Machu Picchu in the Peruvian Andes of South America and consider that this one 50 metric ton stone, which according to university archaeology departments was theorized to have been pushed by hundreds of men up the steep hill to Machu Picchu, and by the way, allegedly without the use of the wheel, as they were not known to have it at that time. But look at just how insanely steep that incline is, and consider that this one stone weighs a whopping 110,000 pounds. I don't care how many people you want to pretend push that stone up this mountain, but this guesswork, which is exactly what it is, a total guess, doesn't seem feasible at all. And like I said, the mystery is real. Whoever brought this stone up to the top of Machu Picchu clearly had a method or capability of doing so that we are not aware of. And speaking of capabilities that are unknown to us, the very precision of various ancient stone cuts around the world only...
Look at that. You can barely even see it. It depends on how big your monitor is, but that is precise.
Make the mystery of that much more impressive. Whether it's the 50-ton granite stones that were brought 500 miles to the Valley Temple located in front of the Sphinx, which were cut with such precision that you can't even fit a razor or a human hair in between. Even the stones that make up the floor around the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau were pieced together with such precision that you can hardly see the line cut itself. Notice these examples concrete. I took photographs of while I toured Egypt. Still watertight precision thousands of years later. And the mystery of the ancients can also be found in the most random and little known places. For example, the Al-Nazla stone located in the remote desert of Saudi Arabia is a total enigma.
Oh my God. Look at that awful modern graffiti on this thing. Ugh. It's awful.
Feet wide and 20 feet tall, it is arguably too large and precise to have been cut by some alleged enormous ancient primitive saw blade. But of course, archaeologists say that it wasn't cut at all, that it must surely be some sort of fluke natural erosion, but I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. This is clearly a cut, and if you want to argue that this is natural, then find me just one other example from anywhere else on Earth that is even remotely comparable to this. Again, like I always say, look and think for yourself. There are many other examples that I could include in this video which illustrate the mysteries of our ancient past that contradict what we were taught, that we are globally connected, or that we are far more advanced than we were led to believe, whether it's the mention of precision statues or vases. But to say that there is no evidence of a lost ancient advanced civilization is simply not true. The mystery is real, and there are accomplishments that were done that far exceed what we were taught, and it's there for all who have eyes to see. Now, what I rather focus on now is going to work on my video on Baalbek, which, like I said, I consider it to be the smoking gun evidence of a legitimate lost ancient advanced civilization. So stay tuned for that. But with that said, tomorrow I'm going to be hosting a live stream where I'm going to discuss not only this video, but the debate between Flint Dibble and Graham Hancock, because there are many other details about that debate that I did not include in this video. In fact, information has come to light that seriously questions a lot of the evidence that Flint Dibble shared in order to try to win the debate. And I decided not to include them in this video because I want to keep this video, I don't want it to be negative, but some of these things will make you question the ethics involved and what people do to try to win a debate.
Talk about me.
So I have a very special guest coming on to join me on the live stream. I think you're going to find it very
he has on Wandering Wolf, I think, in relation to this. Oh no, this is 2 months ago. He did
interesting, and there's going to be a number of details, like I just said, that I know you will find to be, well, of interest. But with that said, leave a comment and share what your thoughts are on everything I shared in this video, as well as share any examples you have that you think is compelling evidence that the ancients were globally connected or were more advanced than what we were taught in school. Also, you can support me by following me on rumble.com. I'm growing my presence there, and also support me on Locals. This weekend, I will be doing a live Q&A on the Locals platform, and it's such a small, inclusive environment that those who support me will have every question or comment that they write out to me addressed. So it's a way of, when I do these live streams and there's thousands of people there, not everything you say will ever be seen, unfortunately, but follow me on Locals to be able to have that.
Okay. Next video. Is there anything that anybody wants to see? Any of Jimmy Corsetti's videos that you want me to go over here. Got a few more. I've been going for over 2 hours, probably my longest stream ever. I want to try to do this more often, but I need to have stuff to do it. Yeah, please like the video, subscribe if you're not. You want to see more stuff like this. There's plenty of other stuff on the channel. Interviews with linguists and archaeologists and Mayans and, you know, stuff like that. Anybody wants to see. I will put, yeah. I really all I ask for is likes. I appreciate that, but I will also do whatever you want for a donation of 50 cents. I am not better than, never mind. Not even going to say that. Can't say that. Can't say that on here, what I was going to say. Regardless, Natron Theory site is a pretty brief slideshow. Yeah, I'll cover that later, Vulpus. I want to keep it to Jimmy Corsetti on the theme of the stream here. So I've got some other videos here. I want to do archaeology is not alive. That's how we'll put it because of the YouTube overlords. We can do that one. Gobekli Tepe situation. Disturbing Gunang Padang update. Let's just do, yeah, let's do this one. Let's do this one. Ooh, let me annotate that on the video. What are we at here? What does it say? Yeah, remind me of that on another stream, Vulpus, and I'll take a look at it. 220. We're gonna say archaeology is not alive. Sweet.
Mysterious ancient sites and digging up to...
Oops.
Archaeology today is now dead. Rest in peace. The grave is right below our very
Cope
feet.
and seethe.
The grave marker is there, and what we once thought of archaeology is no longer the case. We grew up envisioning that archaeologists are working around the clock, around the globe at mysterious ancient sites and digging up to discover the mysteries of our lost ancient past. And what have I have learned in the last number of years since I went down this path of investigating the mysteries of lost ancient civilizations and started making YouTube videos sharing these findings, is that what I thought to be true is so much different than from what reality is today. We live in a time where the oldest and most mysterious archaeological sites on Earth are not being excavated. And I will have some cases in point in this video. We live in a time where a vast majority of people that go to school to get degrees in archaeology or anthropology will never work on an archaeological excavation in their entire careers.
I'm not sure if
in
that's
fact,
true.
Many of them would be lucky to even get a low-paying job at a community college or a small-level university.
That part
I say that with
is true.
respect. This is to no fault of archaeologists. It's no fault of their own. Many people make excuses to say, why is there a lack of excavations and archaeological digs around the world? And most people will say, oh, it's just a lack of funding. If you believe that, you are sorely mistaken. There is no shortage of money in this world. I know some people listening to this might have financial issues. They're like, what are you talking about? I need some money. I'm telling you right now, we all understand that there's no shortage of money in the grand scheme of things. That when the powers that be and various governments and industries and corporations, when they want to throw money at something that they want to do, they do it. That being said, if you've been following my channel over just the last few months, you would have seen me brought attention to the numerous issues involving the two oldest and most mysterious ancient sites on Earth, Gobekli Tepe and Gunang Padang. Now, when I say oldest, Gobekli Tepe is dated at approximately 11,600 years old. And yes, there are a few other sites in Turkey that are dated a couple thousand years older. However, Gobekli Tepe hasn't been fully excavated, and that dating of 11,600 years is
Not
just
good.
what we know today. It is very possible, in fact, even reasonable to suggest that it's the same date as those other sites. And we will not know until we further excavate it. But the site of Gunang Padang in Indonesia is something I'll talk about later in this video, as well as another mystery within Egypt that nobody has really been talking about for the last several years. I made a video on it, and I'm going to be talking about that big controversy later in this video as well. But I'd like to start off by discussing Gunang Padang. Or excuse me, I meant to say Gobekli Tepe. So, if you've been following my last few videos, you've heard me bring to attention that excavations are now at a almost standstill in the context of that there is no plan to fully excavate that site within any of our lifetimes. I have never stated that excavations had stopped entirely, and I point that out because many of my skeptics and people in the media are saying that, no, this is fake news. Excavations have not stopped.
It's very annoying.
Go listen to what I said in my videos. I have never stated that excavations had stopped. What I have said is that they have pulled back excavations and deferred a full excavation of that site to future generations. And in fact, it's in writing that they say that it may be 150
I wish you would share
years
here, but he shared it in a
before
past
that
video.
site is fully dug up. To put that into perspective,
That is true.
into generations, that equates to your great, 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 great grandchildren that will cover a span of 150 years into the future. They will be the ones, as of today, to finally see what is waiting to be discovered within Gobekli Tepe. That site is made up of approximately 200 T-shaped pillars, and that's according to ground penetrating radar. And only 72 of those pillars have been unearthed. And all of these pillars are telling us a story. If you look at them, they're all depicting animals and various things. And even Pillar 43, which is the most famous, has created so much debate and controversy over the years with different ideas of what it could mean. And that's just one pillar. 72 pillars out of 200 means that there's approximately 128 pillars buried under the ground that are indefinitely postponed to be unearthed. And everybody is wondering, what is Gobekli Tepe? Is it a time capsule that was purposely buried to warn us of future cataclysmic events? Is it related to something in the Bible and the story of Noah having built an altar where he sacrificed animals after he emerged from the ark? Some of these ideas people think is so far-fetched and it may be the furthest thing from the truth, but it doesn't matter. What matters is finding out, digging, and finding out exactly what the answers are. And although I don't like to use the word impossible, because what's impossible? People would have thought that televisions were impossible before they were invented. People would have thought airplanes were impossible, cell phones, even the internet.
Giant metal tube floating through the sky. It doesn't make any sense.
In my vocabulary.
Front to God.
However, as of today, it is an accurate statement to say that it is impossible to know what Gobekli Tepe is until it is fully excavated, or at least further excavated to where we can identify what the answer is. Because as of today, nobody knows. It's just nothing more than debate and conjecture. Like I said, when I got into this realm, I never could have imagined that the state of modern archaeology could be in such disarray as it is today. In fact, it's almost become, dare I say, a cult. Not every archaeologist is in a cult, okay? But there seems to be this groupthink that has emerged to where I have presented a very logical, cohesive argument that there is an issue with excavations involving Gobekli Tepe. Yes, I've brought other conspiracy into it, whether it involves certain members of the World Economic Forum that have infiltrated the management of that site because through funding, through the Doges group. I've already talked about that. And that's not what this video is about.
Clear incentives.
So let's put the conspiracy aside, because that's what most people will disagree on.
That he's demonstrated.
But the facts of the matter, which are, of course, facts, are being completely dismissed and overlooked and otherwise not discussed in any capacity by any archaeologists out there from what I've seen. I have identified that there have been destroyed ruins at that site while they've set up the infrastructure of the roads, sidewalks, viewing platforms, and roof systems. That is a fact. Other archaeologists have seen it for themselves and reported on the great controversy that there was destroyed ruins there. Others involving that site have denied it, but it's there for all who have eyes to see. The pictures are there. They laid concrete on top of ruins.
Like
I have brought attention
a road
to
right? Like, yeah, there is this idea that you could protect ruins, which I've seen somebody like John Hoops or Flynn Dibble, two archaeologists. I've seen people put forth that idea, but that's not what a road is. And also, they were using heavy machinery, and it's all, I don't know.
The fact that trees exist at that site, that there's 4 separate orchards that consist of several hundred trees that were indeed planted on top of ancient ruins. Those roots of trees are notorious for destroying ancient ruins. And it's reasonable to say that that will happen at Gobekli Tepe. Now, the other side will tell you that no, we're monitoring the site. We're making sure those roots are going to damage it. And those roots should grow horizontally, so it shouldn't be a factor. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But it certainly puts those ruins in jeopardy. But let's just say the roots are not going to cause damage. If nothing else, the planting of those trees signifies the lack of any type of plan whatsoever to fully excavate the site. Now, the devil's advocate, or let me just say the naysayers will say, no, 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 no. The people that manage excavations at Gobekli Tepe are not the ones that planted them. It was the landowners themselves that did so. But let's look at what we know.
Aye.
Those trees were planted a literal decade after excavations began at Gobekli Tepe. And there's something about that makes no sense. The powers that be within Turkey say, oh, it was the landowners did it to increase the value of the land. And I'm like, huh. I may have not studied archaeology or anthropology, but I did study business.
Who said that?
And I know that there's something off about the statement that they're trying to increase the land at a site that has the world's oldest and most mysterious ancient ruins on it. That site is invaluable.
That doesn't make any sense.
It's priceless.
The
And if you were to
value
put a dollar
is not
amount on
in
it,
all of our
it would be
orchards.
so many millions of dollars. Like if they were to auction off Gobekli Tepe to the highest bidder, what do you think that would go for?
You guys want to start a
Serious
crowdfunding?
money.
Buy it.
And the fact that there's olive trees there is not going to increase that value. I've also come to learn, and this is not in my prior videos, but I did discuss it in a live stream a week ago, as I found out through somebody leaving a comment, that there is a law within Turkey that dates back to the 1930s. It's called the olive tree law. And what it does is it is illegal to cut down olive trees in the country of Turkey. Did you know that? I was alarmed when I found that out. The people on the other side, when they try to justify the existence of those olive trees, will say, oh, well, don't worry, we can remove those and that's not going to stop us from excavating. Okay, well, let's talk business for a second. In the business world, if you say you're going to do something, the executives will ask you, okay, what's the time frame on that? What do you need to do it and when's it going to happen? As of today, there is no plan in place whatsoever to remove those several hundred trees that are on top of ancient ruins.
And you can't
As of
excavate.
today, it is an
with the trees
indefinite
there.
standstill. And it is impossible to dig up the site without the removal of those ruins. It's impossible to dig up the site without the removal of the roads and the concrete sidewalks and viewing platforms and roofs.
Speaking of Iron
roofs,
Heart, whatever.
I've been in
that's
contact
meant.
with, let's
Yeah.
call this person a whistleblower out of Turkey. It's somebody that has a very close connection to that site. And this individual has wished to remain anonymous, but what they have shared with me is that there are significant problems involving one of the roofs at that site. That nobody is digging under it because it's on the verge of collapse because it was installed with shoddy craftsmanship. That in itself has never been reported on. I don't hear any archaeologists discussing it, although that there are people within that site that 100% know it, such as the director of fieldwork, Dr. Lee Clairol, or excuse me, he's the head of fieldwork and the research team. The director of the site is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Nekmi Karul. These gentlemen that are in charge, that have responded to my controversies that I brought to light involving these videos, have spoken out and basically denied every single thing that I've had to say. At no point have they addressed the true controversies. One, that there is no plan to excavate it within our lifetime, which is a complete disservice and is entirely unacceptable. How can any enthusiast of lost ancient history be content on living the rest of their lives not knowing what's waiting to be discovered under the ruins of Gobekli Tepe? How could any of them be content with destroyed ruins themselves? How could they be content with the fact that excavations are being inhibited. If anything, you'd think they would say, yes, we would like to dig up this site, but we just don't have the resources or the permission to do so. What they have said themselves, including Dr. Lee Clare, has said that he has no desire to do it. He has literally stated, as I shared in my prior video, I shared the receipts because I communicated with him directly on x.com, is that he doesn't even think that it should be fully excavated. He thinks that they should wait until the future when future technologies emerge to more safely dig up the ruins. And I'm like,
God,
this sounds like gaslighting. That doesn't make sense. We already have the technological capabilities to dig up an ancient ruin. We've already done the other 72 ruins safely. You have heard
the technology for excavation at this level has been the same for a very long time. There's advances in archaeological techniques, but they involve the use of ground penetrating radar, lidar, technology in the form of knowledge and stuff. But you got to be more specific than that. What do you think is going to come around to make this better? Is it just in theory? But what's the problem with doing it now? I just don't understand.
No problem or controversy involving them, digging up the site and be like, dang it, we broke another T-pillar. We have to stop. We need to ascertain and assess what's going on here involving our excavation methods. Guys, they have water hoses and pressure hoses. They have paintbrushes. They have shovels. Are we going to pretend that we're waiting for the miraculous invention of a new type of shovel or paintbrush? This is BS. We absolutely have the technological capability to unearth that site. And it is inexcusable to suggest otherwise. We have ground penetrating radar that shows us what's under the ground and we can safely navigate from there. And they are also saying that no, excavations haven't stopped. We are doing them today. Okay, well, if that's the case, then are you admitting that you were doing so with unsafe methods before the discovery of this alleged technology that you hope exists someday in the future? That is complete BS. Now, before I finish that thought and go on to the mystery involving Egypt that I mentioned earlier in this video, let me very quickly mention the sponsor of this video, and then I will get on to that mystery from here. Do you get stressed because your monthly income just doesn't seem to cover the bills anymore?
Well, American financing from Jimmy Corsetti. Get that if you need financing on Jimmy Corsetti's Bright Insight 6-page. American financing. Cool.
Financing.net/Bright Insight. That's AmericanFinancing.net/Bright Insight. Link is in the description below. As I was mentioned earlier in the video, there's a controversy within Egypt that nobody's discussing. 7 years ago in 2017, the Scan Pyramid Project identified a mysterious void in the Great Pyramid above the so-called Grand Gallery, and is approximately the same size of the Grand Gallery. Many have suggested that there's a second Grand Gallery above the Grand Gallery. Guys, that was 7 years ago. I made a video on it. I even suggested 7 years ago when I made that video that they should drill a 1-inch diameter hole straight up, stick a camera through it to find out what it is. What's waiting to be discovered in there?
Memes?
We don't even know what the Great Pyramid was. No, I do not think it was built to be a tomb for a pharaoh. I think it was a technological structure that far exceeds our understanding of technology today. That's debatable. Even if you think it was purposely made to bury a king, well, then there could be a mummy waiting to be discovered in there. There could be anything waiting to be discovered in there. There could be answers to how the pyramid was constructed in the first place, which is another total mystery. And we will never know what that mystery is until we go find out. So please, somebody explain to me how it's been 7 years and they still haven't gone looking in there. That makes absolutely no sense. Are they hiding something? Are they just wanting to rack up more tourism dollars by paying for tourist groups to go through and have private permission in the Great Pyramid for several $1,000s a pop? You know, that brings me back to Gobekli Tepe. Never mind.
He was talking about the pyramids for a minute, but he's talking about archaeology.
If nothing else,
and
if absolutely nothing else, the situation in Gobekli Tepe is that they invested millions of dollars for tourism infrastructure, and now that it's a cash cow. Just a few years ago, Gobekli Tepe was making, or only had 19,000 something tourists per year. Now it's at nearly 500,000. Each one of them is buying a ticket at the ticket booth to enter the site. And now it is a cash cow bringing in millions and millions and millions of dollars a year, not including whatever they charge for concessions and buying bottles of water and everything, t-shirts and everything else there. It seems to me that archaeology has been corrupted or mismanaged by people that are incompetent and not capable of managing an archaeological site. Whether it's the Great Pyramid of Giza, whether it's Gobekli Tepe or Gunang Padang, like I mentioned earlier in this video. In Indonesia, a potential 27,000-year-old pyramid, or pyramidal structure, let's say. Many people dispute and say there's no evidence of that. That is another case where the word impossible now must be invoked, because
like the video,
there,
please.
according to scientific measurement, i.e. ground penetrating radar, there could be a possible man-made chamber and tunnel underneath the ground there. And geologists that are actual experts at looking at ground penetrating radar have strongly said, or have said that the data strongly suggests that that structure is likely man-made. And there is, as of today, absolutely no plan in place to excavate that tunnel and chamber. Some people say, oh, it's probably just a lava tube. Natural anomaly. And some people feel convinced that it's something related to our ancient past. And if it's 27,000 years old, that would stand to rewrite human history forever. Just like potentially discovering whatever Gobekli Tepe
totally right.
truly
They're
is.
Natural artifacts, politics.
What I'm trying to tell you today, and the purpose of this video, is that there are actual mysteries involving our lost ancient past that are waiting to be discovered. There are God knows how many thousands or hundreds of thousands of archaeologists around the world that would jump on the opportunity to take part in the excavation of these sites. God knows how many people would throw their money at it to do so. We have the means, money, and the motive to do so, and it's not happening. We have to start asking why this is, and this is why I say that archaeology is dead.
So
if we're not excavating,
it's just so strange to me that they're not further. They've stopped widespread excavation at Gobekli Tepe. They've said that themselves. It's so strange to me that people are defending this. Like it just doesn't make any sense.
It's dead. And I already know what the naysayers and devil's advocates to me will say. They'll say, we are doing excavations. You're just not patient enough. I'm like, stop. Just stop. That's not what's happening. There's no plan to fully excavate Gunang Padang, and there's no plan in our lifetime to fully excavate Gobekli Tepe. There's no date that they're going to finally drill into the Great Pyramid to discover what that void is. Yes. Everything's at a standstill.
That's another weird one.
Nothing's happening. The wheels aren't moving. Like I said, I didn't study archaeology, but I studied business. I'm telling you right now, if there's no plan in place, it's not happening.
Yes.
That's it.
That's right.
So with that said, I wanted to put this video out there to wake everybody up to understand
leadership.
that this is an issue that I feel like can unite humanity. This could unite the conspiracy theorists, the archaeologists, the alternative ancient historians, to all come together and say, hey, we want to see further excavation of these sites. We can all debate till we're blue in the face about what they are and to discuss the possibility of a lost ancient advanced civilization. We can debate all that, but none of us will ever know what the truth is until these sites are properly excavated, and it is intolerable that we could possibly live the rest of our lives not knowing what these answers are. What are we doing? Tomorrow's not even promised. What is going on? This makes my conspiracy wheels moving because it makes absolutely no sense.
So who funds the excavations? The Turkish government, or is it privately funded? It's multiple sources, and I don't think all of it's public. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is not easily accessible in English because the site is in Turkey. So it's hard to say. But there are multiple sites, and Jimmy Corsetti here has shown that there are connections to the WEF.
If there was a lack of money, they would say it. You'd have these directors out of Gobekli Tepe saying, we don't have the funds. They have the funds.
Yeah, they have plenty
Egypt
of money.
has no short of funding. Egypt has plenty of money. That is not an issue. Did you know that Indonesia, because I mentioned Gunang Padang, at one point they said that they were willing to allocate, this is as of 2014, so 10 years ago, they were willing to allocate, quote, unlimited funding and resources to excavate that site, and something shifted. That's no longer the case. What happened? Guys, this is a problem. I know it in everything in me that something is wrong here, and I don't see how anyone could possibly disagree that not excavating the most mysterious ancient sites on Earth is not a problem. So I'm calling on everybody to start speaking out and demanding further excavation of these sites. It is only through the power of public persuasion and the court of public opinion, as it's often called, that any chance of change could possibly be made. And so that's what I want to leave you with today. I'm going to be doing a live stream here in just the next 2 hours. And I encourage you to tune in because I'm going to be discussing further about this as well as answering questions and reading comments about it. This is something that people need to wake up to. So I hope you join me on that live stream. My name is Jimmy Corsetti. My channel is called Bright Insight. Hit the like button and subscribe. If you want to support me and what I'm doing,
also hit the like button and subscribe on my video.
Help in my life, consider supporting me on locals.com or
Political promises are
patreon.com,
worthless.
preferably locals. Follow me on rumble.com. Follow.
Okay, this is from 3 days ago. Let's do Gunang Padang. Let's do Gunang Padang here.
Ancient civilizations, well, by the end of this video, you'll likely think otherwise, as what I'm about to show you is alarming to say the least. In fact, the disturbing details that I've recently uncovered involving the circumstances at the world's oldest pyramidal structure took me by total surprise. The site of Gunang Padang in Indonesia has created a firestorm of attention over the last few years, as this potentially 27,000-year-old structure could stand to upend the known narrative of ancient human civilizations, as it was thought to be totally impossible for primitive prehistoric cavemen to be able to geoengineer a mountainous hilltop into a series of 5 step-like terraces, which many described as being the world's oldest pyramid-like formation. However, very little is known about this mysterious site, as we do not know exactly who created it or when, but at some point in the distant past, an ancient civilization carried literally hundreds of thousands of volcanic stones up this steep mountainous hill and created various structures that once stood here thousands of years ago. And today, the ruinous landscape of those remnants is all that remains. That and many unanswered questions.
So this site is layered, right? So there's different archaeological layers. The first 3 layers are not under debate. They're like a few thousand years apart from each other, and they're very old. But it's the 4th layer that is controversial, and that one is the one that is potentially 27,000 years old, which would put it way back in in the ice ages, and it would upend our understanding of human history. Which is
However,
worth
the
checking.
man-made nature of this site is well established, and although many will debate on whether it should be classified as an actual pyramid, the reality is that whatever you want to label it is totally inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, as it was undoubtedly created by an unknown group of ancient people, as archaeologists have confirmed. However, the intense debate involves just how old this structure actually is, and what could be discovered if this site were to be dug and fully excavated, which, surprisingly, it has not. In fact, various archaeologists have been consumed by discussion as to the legitimacy of the 27,000-year dating itself, as scientific papers have been published and later retracted.
I don't believe. Well, number one, the paper should not have been retracted. It should have been responded to, and Flint Dibble agrees with that. He said that on the JRE podcast, but it was retracted because of what Flint Dibble said, and also a guy who is friends or acquainted, or he's talked to this guy. They spoke about the guy that did the work here very negatively. It was very disrespectful, and I did not appreciate it at all.
To the firestorm of debate as to just how ancient the site actually is. Make no mistake, we do not actually know just how old Gunang Padang is, and most of the recent evidence neither confirms nor denies that it could be the oldest ancient structure on Earth, as further study is required to ascertain a precise dating. But this is where things start to get interesting. As you may recall, Graham Hancock's hit Netflix series Ancient Apocalypse brought this ancient site international attention, where he showcased the use of ground-penetrating radar that was conducted at Gunang Padang, which identified a subterranean tunnel connecting to a chamber or cavity, in which the surrounding soil was dated to approximately 27,000 years.
Crucially, the soil was dated, but it was dated in the absence of human artifacts. So the soil itself was dated, and that is accurate. That's how old it is. But that doesn't mean that it's human. And I am not informed enough to evaluate this. This is geology. This type of stuff here. I don't know if that's like natural or not. It looks to me, because of how like regular it totally could be natural. I don't know. It could go either way. This is in contrast to something like the Yanagumi stuff that we looked at earlier, which is looks like it's definitely man-made because the right angles and everything. This right here, I mean, it could be natural, it could be man-made. We just don't know. And the research that they've done so far does not confirm or deny whether it was human-made on that crucial fourth layer.
Years old. But to be clear, any existing ancient artifacts have not actually dated to that period of time.
Oh,
but the
come on.
bizarre reality is
just
that an
says it.
appropriate archaeological excavation has not actually taken place that would confirm otherwise, which has only intensified the debate as to whether this subterranean anomaly is an actual man-made structure centered at the heart of this mysterious and incredibly old site, or, as the skeptics loudly suggest, it could simply be a natural anomaly, such as a cave or a lava tube created during the formation of this hill long ago, which in itself is volcanic in nature. However, experts who have physically worked at the site, such as highly credentialed geologist Professor Danny Hillman of the Indonesian Institute of Sciences,
Danny Hillman, this is the
and
guy
by the way, has 176 publications and over 8,500 scholarly citations. And he has adamantly insisted that his interpretation of the ground-penetrating radar data strongly warrants an excavation into the tunnel and chamber, as it has strong potential.
This guy is not an archaeologist, but he's a, what, geologist, they just said? Geotechnology,
6 publications and over...
He is qualified to say whether or not it's man-made or not. Like, that's what he knows. I don't know that stuff. He knows that. Archaeologists might know that. It depends on what they do. Archaeology is a very holistic field, but the archaeologists just have to look. It's not going to destroy the site. If I remember correctly, Flint Dibble had claimed that it would. It wouldn't. You can go in a place where it wouldn't harm anything and check that layer, and they just haven't done that.
8,500 scholarly citations, and he has adamantly insisted that his interpretation of the ground-penetrating radar data strongly warrants an excavation into the tunnel and chamber, as it has strong potential to be a man-made construct. And keep in mind, he has decades of experience as a geologist, which is exactly the field of studied profession that would be most qualified to interpret this type of data.
Right after.
Which is exactly why Graham Hancock has firmly advocated that this site requires further study and excavation to find out exactly what lays buried under these mysterious ancient ruins, especially considering just how enormous the implications are. I mean, can you imagine what could be waiting to be discovered inside a potentially 27,000-year-old chamber? It would literally rewrite history and be arguably the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. So enough discussion and debate already. Let's send archaeologists to go digging so we can find out exactly what it is. And who could possibly be opposed to excavating this subterranean anomaly? I mean, on one side, you have the naysayers screaming that it's probably a natural formation, like they say about everything. Whereas those with an open mind and that carry a spirit of exploration and discovery want to find out the answer. And ultimately, we will never know until we dig and find out. So with that said, what exactly is the holdup? Well, this is where things go from interesting to quite strange. Because if you're thinking to yourself that perhaps this has something to do with a lack of funding or resources, I'm here to tell you that that just isn't the case, as the Indonesian government stated a full decade ago that they are offering unlimited funding to researchers that are trying to uncover whether this mountain holds one of history's biggest discoveries. And although that was a long time ago, and that offer does not appear to have been upheld, and in fact, the authorities within the Indonesian government are now saying that they will not be the ones to fund it. Hence the non-existent archaeological excavation, which has not happened and has remained at a standstill for the last 10 years since 2014. So I'll ask again, what is the holdup? Well, before I take you down the dark rabbit hole of what I uncovered, it's important that I remind you of what I shared in my recent video involving the disturbing updates surrounding Gobekli Tepe in Turkey, as it will further highlight just how dark the situation.
Isn't the site covered in stone? Would be very hard to bring heavy equipment up there. Yeah, but they have methods of doing that. The site is not entirely covered in stone. The layer 4 has ways you could go in from the side. They have ways of boring in. They wouldn't need that heavy of equipment to do it. And with the funding that should be there for something like this, it wouldn't be a problem.
Is at Gunang Padang. As I previously outlined, the current state of affairs involving excavations at Gobekli Tepe has been, as far as I'm concerned, corrupted, as the tentacles of the World Economic Forum have seemingly infiltrated excavation management at one of the world's oldest, largest, and most mysterious ancient sites. As a 20-year partnership was established in 2016 involving the Doges Group, which is a Turkish conglomerate that has been made the sole partner of excavations and tourism management at this site. They are the ones making decisions here, and they have unlimited funding and resources as well. And I was astonished to learn that the CEO of the Doges Group is a
yeah, so Graham Hancock documentary, Ancient Apocalypse. So, yes, so there are a lot of stones on the top, but it doesn't completely cover the site. And section 4 is deeper than the others. Each consecutive layer is deeper than the other ones. So there are places where you can get in from the side and still be able to get down in there. Also, I mean, it's parts of it have already been excavated. It's not like a you could do it. You could do it. It's a very large site. It's not. This isn't an issue that they've that's been discussed on why they're not excavating. They've just specifically said they don't want to.
Longtime member of the World Economic Forum, and by the way, that 20-year partnership was literally announced at the annual WF meeting in Davos, which only makes this entire situation that much more bizarre.
It's very
but
strange.
Moreover, everything that's happened at this site since the partnership was established speaks volumes. Whether it's the destruction of priceless ancient ruins that were destroyed when they built the infrastructure for tourism, which started following the partnership with the Doges Group, which included multiple roofs, viewing platforms, concrete sidewalks, and asphalt roads, which again were constructed over ruins, which caused destructions of those relics. But if that wasn't bad enough, all of this infrastructure is now clearly preventing a full excavation of this site, as they would have to physically remove the asphalt roads, sidewalks, roofs, and viewing platforms to do so. And by the way, you may recall me asking in my prior video the sincere question as to whether the 4 sets of tree orchards were planted over any ancient ruins at this site. Because as you can see, they're literally sitting in the middle of the site itself. Well, I regret to tell you that I did some research, and the answer is unfortunately yes. In fact, you can see the before and after photos. These orchards were planted a full decade after excavations began. In fact, I got in touch with an archaeologist who physically conducted excavations at Gobekli Tepe, and I was shocked to learn that all of these trees were indeed planted on top of buried ruins at Gobekli Tepe, which raises many questions and only further validates that.
Okay, so this here, yes, and why are they still there? Because they stand in areas with more than 1 meter of rubble above archaeological structures. Okay, what is that rubble? Is the rubble from something modern? Is it from the site itself? The roots are preventing erosion. What was wrong with just the grasses that were there? Weren't the grasses also just preventing erosion? Is there any citation, any reference that says that they planted them? Why they planted them? Did they plant them to prevent erosion? I know that, yes, trees' roots prevent erosion, but like olive, I looked this up before, olive roots can go down, it's 1 meter at a minimum, but they can go down to 7 meters deep. So, and they would move and destroy stone. I mean, that's what roots do. That's why you don't plant trees too close to your house, because they can destroy the foundation. So I don't know why they're just pretending that this isn't a problem, or at least a possible problem.
There is no intention in the foreseeable future to fully excavate this site, as they would have to cut them all down to do so. And by the way, they've made every excuse in the book to justify the existence of these trees, stating that they will help preserve the ruins from erosion. But give me a break. These ruins have been safely buried underground for nearly 12,000 years. And I even heard others try to explain that the planting of these olive trees would increase the value of the land. Really? Gobekli Tepe is one of the oldest and largest ancient sites on Earth, and the land is already priceless. But if all of this isn't bad enough, what is most alarming is that since the Doges Group took control of this site and again became the sole partner of excavation management,
the Turkish Ministry of Culture and Tourism will see Doges Group become the sole partner of the major Neolithic site. Come on.
They have inexplicably chosen to defer a full excavation to, quote, future generations. In fact, it's been said that it may be 150 years before excavations are complete, as they want to focus.
They've done 5%. That's the estimation in a few decades. I don't even think they would get that close in 150 years. It wouldn't be done in 150 years because they've only done 5% in like 4 decades. Ugh.
Focus on excavating other ancient sites in Turkey, thus leaving Gobekli Tepe at just 5% excavated. That's right, approximately 95% of the ruins at this site are still buried, which, by the way, is exactly how I came to start my investigation involving the archaeological progress at this site.
Yeah, so it says here, article from 2017, only 5% has been excavated. 2021, only 5% has been excavated. I think the website now still says only 5% excavated, which, 5%, that's obviously an estimate. Maybe they're a little bit higher, but if they had done enough more to call it 10%, then they would probably change it to 10%. And nobody has said that or claimed that they have.
As I was shocked to learn that 5% figure hadn't changed in the last 7 years since 2017, and that same figure was corroborated by a professional guide to Gobekli Tepe as recently as 2023. Which
she could
makes
just be citing that old number.
No justifiable sense for there to be no substantial or measurable progress in all that time. And although small-scale excavations do continue today, there is no active plan to fully excavate the well over 100 pillars that remain buried. Only 72 pillars out of approximately 200 have been unearthed. Pillars.
Oh, yeah, I know Dan. He's a friend. Has tempered his initial skepticism of Gunang Padang. I have as well, actually, because I was skeptical of the site at first as well. Based on reviewing the supplemental reporting of the human artifacts found at the site. I have to look into it more because I looked into it for about 2 hours on a stream once, and I found it to be not human, but I hadn't seen, that was based on the paper, and I haven't seen all the evidence now, and I'm willing to go back and look at it. I just have so many different things to look at right now.
Which, like I said before, tell us a story. This site has massive historical importance and could lead to
answers. There's also, so there's another thing here. A lot of these archaeologists, they are much less interested in the pillars as they are with the material culture that's in the ground. So they don't really care as much, at least I shouldn't say that generally, but that I would be willing to argue, I would be willing to change my opinion on this with new information, but they tend to be more interested in the material culture found at the site and its orientation and its context more than the pillars themselves. But the pillars, they show all this incredible art, and that tells us so much about the culture based on like what they're revering, what they choose to put on, and like we can learn a lot from that as well. And some archaeologist I was arguing with online, as I do so often, they were arguing that it was like that it would destroy the site to do further excavations. And it is true that archaeology is inherently destructive, but if done properly, you annotate what's been found and you have the information. It's just, I just don't understand.
Regarding our mysterious lost ancient past. But as of today, none of us will be alive to see it fully excavated, which should disturb any true enthusiast of ancient history.
I am truly
How could
disturbed.
any of us feel content with living the rest of our lives not knowing what is waiting to be discovered here? So I'll ask again, why on earth are members of the World Economic Forum even remotely associated with excavation management at Gobekli Tepe, and why would they defer excavations to future generations? And that question right there is the perfect segue to circle back to Gunang Padang in Indonesia, and the question as to what is the holdup preventing a full archaeological excavation at that site, particularly into the subterranean tunnel and chamber. And this is where things go from interesting and strange to downright disturbing. But let me very quickly mention the sponsor of this video. An extremely important conversation that not enough people are having involves spike proteins.
Find that on Jimmy's website, Jimmy's YouTube page, The Wellness Company, for health stuff. Looks good. Haven't looked into it, but it's what he's advertising, and I'm going to skip the ad, but I'll at least plug it for him. And also, yeah, please like my video, subscribe if you're not. More anthropology, archaeology, cultural anthropology. It's what we do here. Oh, what's going on now? I'm frozen. I feel completely helpless. Unfreeze. Okay. Refresh. Play.
Now, as I was
fixed it.
just saying, this is where
Fantastic.
things go from interesting and strange to downright
I won't.
disturbing.
I'm not going to be
Because
alive.
again, obviously,
Oh, so somebody was asking about this earlier. Ironheart, was that you? See how like the fourth one is under and on the sides? You can get in from the side. You don't need to go through the stone on top, and they could find a location to do it. It's a large site.
any reasonable person would support the further study and excavation of Gunang Padang. So I took it upon myself to find out exactly who the key decision makers are at Gunang Padang, those who have the decision-making power to excavate this site or not, and I could not believe what I uncovered. I learned of a gentleman by the name of Hilmar Farid, who is the Director General of Culture at Indonesia's Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology, who was quoted in a recent New York Times article from just a few months ago, saying in regards to further excavations at Gunang Padang, quote, "From the perspective of someone like me who has to mobilize resources to support certain activities," he said, "this is certainly the last priority."
You have to justify.
Wow,
that. Like,
a last
why?
priority. In other words, there is no active or definitive plan in place to find out what the subterranean tunnel and chamber is. How can this be? We literally have scientific data, i.e. ground penetrating radar, that has confirmed an anomaly at what could prove to be the most ancient site on Earth. And exploring to find out exactly what it is somehow a last priority. And that right there caused the wheels within my conspiracy brain to start moving, and I decided to dig further. Starting with Hilmar Farid, who, like I said, is the Director General of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology, which led me to want to know who this Director General reports to, which is when I learned of someone by the name of Nadiem Makarim, who is the actual minister of the ministry itself, a political position appointed by the President of Indonesia in 2021. And Nadiem is a former businessman and billionaire who had created a massively successful company called Gojek that he later resigned from upon taking his position as the minister. So I decided to look further into him, as his political position clearly ranks him as the true decision maker.
Corruption is very common in Indonesia. I actually used to live there. My dad worked for the American and Canadian governments in Indonesia on financial anti-corruption stuff.
Of what happens at Gunang Padang, and let's not
when
forget,
I was a kid.
Director General Hilmar Farid, who said excavating Gunang Padang is his last priority, reports directly to the minister himself. And what I learned about Minister Makarim is the most disturbing part of this video. He is a member of the World Economic Forum and is in fact one of their global shapers, whose purpose is to implement the WEF's agenda throughout.
And of course, Jimmy has been accused of like anti-Semitism for bringing this stuff up. It's like, no, it's relevant. And also ideas of like globalism being necessarily anti-Semitism are they're just ridiculous. Like there's more than just the Jews, guys. You sound like Groypers accusing everybody of being Jews. Like it's not like the head of the WEF, the guy who started it, is a German Catholic. This guy's not Jewish. I assume he's not Jewish. He's Indonesian. I don't think there's a lot of Jews in Indonesia. Like, this is not a Jewish thing. It's a globalist thing. And people can be against globalism without being anti-Semitic. Like me, I'm not anti-Semitic and I'm against globalism. But yeah, whatever.
The world. In fact, just so you understand, listen to this short clip from Klaus Schwab where he openly brags about penetrating government cabinets throughout the world with his global shapers.
But what we are very proud of now is the young generation.
Yeah, what? This guy's Jewish? Is he? Is that what you're saying? This is
like Prime Minister Trudeau.
His name is Prime Minister Blackface, and I will not hear him referred to as anything else but Prime Minister Blackface.
President of Argentina and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and
He really just said that?
half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the world. Grateful. We, in addition to the young global leaders, we have now the global shapers in 450 cities around the world.
And yes, a global shaper is exactly who Minister Makarim is. And he has been a longtime member of the World Economic Forum and is now placed within a government cabinet in Indonesia that controls the archaeological progress at Gunang Padang, which, like I've already stated, is at a standstill. And by the way, to those of you who do not understand what the WEF's agenda is, I'll refer you to the comment section of this video as I hope others will help inform you as to what their ultimate plan is. But it's something that everyone who's free on this earth needs to be aware of. These people have infiltrated governments, corporations, fields of science, and education, and the news media as well. And as far as leadership and decision makers at Gunang Padang, all of this just gets deeper and more concerning from here. For example, like I said, Minister Nadiem Makarim was appointed by the President of Indonesia in 2021. However, the minister in the respective department before him, another Indonesian politician by the name of Babang Brajonegoro, forgive my mispronunciation, is also associated with the World Economic Forum and has attended their annual meetings. Interesting, but it does not stop there. Remember Director General Hilmar Farid, who of course reports to the now Minister Makarim? Well, upon doing some creative internet searching, I came across this, which is that in 2019, he signed a pledge with the World Economic Forum, and apparently or seemingly in collaboration with Netflix, involving the control of digital information.
It absolutely does. The success of having cabinet members of governments worldwide be a part of your organization openly incentivizes others to join your organization if they are power seekers. This is textbook, shout out the good old boys. This is textbook patronage, right? Like these people that are involved with the WEF, they are like, there are some people that have good connections, they have good credentials, they have all these things that make them good candidates for positions of power. And then what you have is that they help the WEF by, or the WEF helps them by assisting them with any sort of things, whatever benefits come out of being a member of this group. And then what happens is they in turn help the WEF by pushing their agenda wherever they go. And the technology that we have, this global technology, pushes this supernatural, and I don't mean, supranational, not supernatural, but supranational organization, this organization that is above national governments. Excuse me, it's a global organization, and it's directly at odds with people who are at the national level. And the technology that we have that allows us to travel around the globe, to contact people around the globe in an instant, not travel in an instant, but travel very quickly, communicate in an instant. This allows this type of thing to be possible.
Or literacy that would be shared with children and their parents' rights associated with it. Oh, I'm sure the intentions here are totally pure, and this has nothing to do with controlling or censoring information that would otherwise be taught to kids. But whatever this partnership is about, we must focus on the reality that the key decision makers who decide whether Gunang Padang will or will not be excavated are seemingly saturated with people that are part of the WEF. And what's wild is that appears to be the case at what just so happens to be at two of the oldest and most mysterious ancient sites on planet Earth, both Gobekli Tepe and Gunang Padang. Both of which warrant a full excavation, but again, as of today, both are at a more or less standstill. Think about that. What are we to make of this?
Let that sink in.
Now, as I continued down this thought-provoking rabbit hole, there was something else that came to my attention. which is the massive resistance within the media involving anything related to alternative ancient history. For example, there may be no other media outlet on Earth that has been more critical of Graham Hancock than The Guardian. In fact, they almost seem obsessed with tarnishing his reputation and his 3 decades of work. I mean, they have numerous headlines, or shall I say hit pieces, going as far as to state that Ancient Apocalypse was the most dangerous show on Netflix. Which, let's be real, that is one of the most absurd things I've heard. Really? Dangerous? But ridiculous headlines aside, I became curious as to why this particular media firm has been so inclined to relentlessly go after Graham Hancock. So I decided to investigate who their decision makers are within the organization.
Oh my gosh.
And I came across Catherine Viner, who is the editor-in-chief for The Guardian. And upon doing some more creative internet searching, I came across a Huffington Post article from several years ago, which I learned of something that I had never even heard of before, which are the so-called Supergirls of Davos, which were invited to a World Economic Forum meeting, which Catherine Viner was included with. And wow, take a moment to scan through some of the names that she was there with, literally stacked with many of the most powerful women on Earth. I won't bother reading out all the names, but really hit pause and browse through the list of them.
Virginia Romney, Michelle Obama, Janet Yellen, why did it say Janet Yellen? Janet Yellen of the Federal Reserve, Michelle Obama, Ruth Porat of Google, DuPont, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, oh my gosh, WHO, Fox News and CNN, Bloomberg, Walmart, wow.
It's kind of incredible. And although Miss Viner may not be an actual member of the WEF, I'm actually not sure if she is or not, but if nothing else, she is certainly part of the cool kids club there. Make of what you want from all of this, but the reality is that every single entity involved in deciding whether Gunang Padang is excavated, as well as the people in the media that control the narrative about it, are all deeply connected or associated with the WEF. Is that really just a coincidence? All I know is that what is arguably the 2 most mysterious ancient sites on Earth are at a more or less standstill when it comes to a meaningful archaeological excavation
I'm not familiar with
and
this.
finding out more answers about our
Criticized
lost
the
ancient
CIA.
past. And that just does not sit well with me. And I find it extremely concerning that the WEF is even remotely associated with the progress or lack thereof that's happening at these sites. Leave a comment and share what your thoughts are on all of this, everything that's discussed in this video. And
Yeah, leave a
besides
comment
hitting the like
on
button,
my video
share this
and hit the
video
like
across
button.
the internet, whether on Reddit,
yeah.
Quora, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter. We need to allow the court of public opinion to become aware of these circumstances because that is the only chance to have any sort of meaningful change. And also stay tuned, as tomorrow afternoon I will be doing a live stream involving this very topic, where I will be answering questions and discussing comments that have been made about this topic in itself. And that being said, go follow me on rumble.com. I'm trying to grow a presence there, and if you would like to support me, as well as have access to my videos the day before they come out public for everyone else, support me on locals.com or patreon.com. Preferably locals. I like them far more and they're far better to me. But that's a way of...
Okay, ancient Baalbek, proof of advance. I am not really familiar with this. Maybe I am. I'll have to look at it, but let me just drop the timestamp. 317. Academic agent did a stream on a book called The Cultural Cold War. I think I remember this. I don't think I watched it. That showed the receipts. Townby was a famous British historian. Yeah, many such cases.
There was only one site on Earth that was actual tangible evidence of a mysteriously lost ancient advanced civilization that existed in our prehistoric past. The enigmatic site of Baalbek, Lebanon is arguably the most profound example above all else. And although there are other ancient sites around the world that are evidence of a lost civilization, by the end of this video you will see why Baalbek is literal proof of it. And I had the great privilege of visiting this site last September, and what I witnessed completely blew me away, as it was confirmation that what was achieved at this site far exceeds the known capabilities of the ancients. In fact, Baalbek contains what of some of the greatest feats of engineering known to mankind, which includes some of the largest stone blocks that were ever moved, lifted, and stacked in all of human history. And not only that, the largest stone columns ever constructed in all of classical history. But even more impressive is that this site also contains the largest stone monoliths that were ever quarried in all of human history. Yet somehow, we inexplicably do not know who did it, how, or even when. And although modern historians credit the Phoenicians and the Romans for constructing this site, when you research the nuanced details, you quickly learn that this is nothing more than unsubstantiated guesswork. And more likely, the reality is that the Romans found this site and built upon it, as you will see in this video.
Yeah,
But
and by the way, this is very, very common. If a site was important to people before and new people come in, it's very common for them to make something on that site because it's considered like a sacred site, and the spot itself has significance. And that could be just, innately significant in an animistic sort of mono way that it has power, or it could be that it's important to a population that they've conquered. There's many examples of this throughout history, everywhere.
as I just mentioned, this site is made up of some of the largest stone blocks that were ever moved, lifted, and stacked in the history of mankind, which are these three behemoths known as the trilithons. And pictures simply do not do these ultra-massive stones justice, as they are 19 meters long, or just over 62 feet. They are 4.2 meters tall, which is just a few inches shy of 14 feet, and they are 3.6 meters thick, which is just shy of 12 feet. To put the sheer size of these stones into perspective, consider that the height of an NBA basketball hoop is 10 feet, or just over 3 meters. And forgive the rough illustration, but consider that these stones are closer to 1.5 times taller than a basketball hoop. And because these stones are so high up, and in fact 30 feet off the ground approximately, the pictures having been taken with an ultra-wide camera lens, you totally lose the perspective. But what your eyes witness in person makes your jaw drop. And each of these stones weigh in at a whopping 800 metric tons, which equates to nearly 900 imperial tons apiece. That's over 1,750,000 pounds each that were somehow transported a half mile from a quarry before being lifted and perfectly stacked approximately 30 feet off the ground. But to put this unbelievable weight into perspective, these stones are literally 10 times the weight of the 80-ton granite stones that were lifted into the Great Pyramid of Giza, which in itself is a profound mystery. And the trilithons make up the foundation of the Heliopolis, which the Temple of Jupiter was built upon. And this is where you'll also find the columns that are the largest in classical history, reaching a height of 65 feet or 20 meters, and they are a staggering 8.2 feet or 2.5 meters in diameter. Many of them have fallen down and broken over the millennia. However, when you compare them to people, you can ascertain their truly imposing magnitude. But this is where the profound mystery gets wild, because you would think that a structure that contains the largest stone blocks and columns in human history, which again, modern historians claim was created by the Romans, you would think that we would know who built it, how, and when. I mean, the Romans were renowned for documenting everything. Yet, the Temple of Jupiter is absent of any historical record. Again, to be clear, it is unknown who built this, how, or when, which raises serious questions. It seems to me that the reason for the total lack of documentation is because the Phoenicians nor the Romans did not build the most impressive features of this site. They simply found Baalbek and built on top of it, as has been done at various ancient sites throughout the world, throughout human history. In fact, you can distinctly observe that there are 2 and arguably 3 different construction methods that were utilized here, as the varying stonework couldn't be more obvious, and appears to be recycled from prior destruction. In fact, it is totally ridiculous to even suggest that the original builders of Baalbek would create something so astounding only to finish it with such comparatively lazy and inferior construction. And honestly, not to be a smartass, but anyone that grew up watching Sesame Street can clearly see that one of these things is not like the other. Which is why it's important to highlight that the Romans clearly built on top of it, as the newest stonework clearly matches much of the architecture we see in Rome. And here is a curiously significant fact that we should all take a moment to dwell on. which is that Baalbek is 1,400 miles or over 2,200 kilometers away from Rome as the bird flies. And by modern road, the distance is actually nearly 2,300 miles or almost 3,700 kilometers. So here's a big question. Why would the Romans build the most fantastically sophisticated structure in their entire empire thousands of miles from the capital? And here's a fascinating detail to dwell on along with it, which is that the largest single stone in Rome is the 53-ton capital block that makes up part of the Trajan's column. 53 tons, which means that the trilithon stones are more than 15 times heavier than the largest stones within the Roman capital. In fact, if you look at the nuanced details of the Colosseum, you will observe that it is made up of small stones, nothing even remotely comparable to what we see at Baalbek, which, by the way, I haven't even mentioned the 24 enormous 350-ton stones that the trilithons were stacked upon, nor the many other humongous monoliths that weigh over 600 tons that are found throughout the Heliopolis. These stones themselves are some of the largest stones ever cut and moved in human history, and yet they are dwarfed by the trilithons and are somehow a side note. And do you want to hear another enigma that's quite thought-provoking? Well, it is a bizarre fact that the use of the Roman foot measurement was not used at Baalbek. A little-known yet significant detail that took me by surprise, as it is further suggestive evidence that the Romans did not construct the foundation of this site. And when you add in the perplexing reality that they did not document who built this, how, or when, it only makes the complex that much more mysterious. In fact, few are even aware that the site of Baalbek itself is actually documented to be prehistoric, with evidence dating back at least 11,000 years, which that incredible fact never seems to be mentioned by modern historians and archaeologists when discussing the perplexing mysteries of what was achieved here. And if all of that isn't interesting enough, it only gets more fascinating from here. But let me quickly mention the sponsor of this video, which is birchgold.com.
Hey,
we recently had some monumental
birchgold.com.
news that only get more fascinating from here. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the largest stone monoliths ever quarried in human history are also found at this site, and the size and magnitude of which are nothing short of astonishing. This one stone you see here weighs more than 1,200 tons and is 68 feet long and 14 feet tall, very similar to the trilithon stones, although approximately 5 feet longer. However, it gives you some perspective for just how massive the trilithon stones are, as they are virtually the same height. It paints you a picture to the level that the pictures do not do justice. But what's even more remarkable is that there is a stone that was discovered just several years ago that sits behind and below this stone and is estimated at over 1,600 tons, which equates to over 3.5 million pounds. Known as the Forgotten Stone, it measures 19.6 meters long, or 64 feet. It is 6 meters, or just shy of 20 feet wide, and get this, it is 5.5 meters, or 18 feet tall. In other words, this stone is just 2 feet shy of being the height of 2 NBA basketball hoops stacked on top of each other. I cannot begin to state just how insane this site is to witness in person. Pictures do not do it justice, but the mysteries of Baalbek go far beyond the size and magnitude of the stonework, as here is another detail that will blow your mind. As I mentioned, the largest stone columns of classical history are here, which are made up of limestone, which was quarried not far away. However, these columns do not include the 200 rose granite columns that once stood at this site. And here is what is so unbelievably wild about them. This rose granite originated from the Aswan quarry in Egypt and is more than 700 miles away, and comes from this same exact Egyptian quarry that is famous for supplying the Great Pyramid's so-called King's Chamber and Grand Gallery with hundreds of rose granite blocks that weigh as much as 80 tons apiece that were transported 500 miles from Aswan, which in itself is a total mystery that's been heavily debated for decades. However, these 200 multi-ton rose granite columns that were transported to Baalbek weren't simply brought here by going down the Nile River and traversing over flatland to Lebanon. Are you ready for this? They had to be carried up and over the Lebanon mountains to reach Baalbek, which averages 2,500 meters or 8,200 feet in elevation, with peaks reaching over 3,000 meters or 10,000 feet. The Lebanon mountains are unbelievably rugged, and few are aware that all of these stone columns had to be carried over this mountain to reach Baalbek. How and why would they go to such profound extent to do this? And thus, they had some unknown capability to make this endeavor feasible. It cannot be overstated just how magnificent of an undertaking this was. The Lebanon mountains are no joke, and it is simply a matter of fact that the only way to get these columns to Baalbek was to go over these mountains. And honestly, it's the accumulation of all the nuanced details surrounding the works of Baalbek that make it so compelling for evidence of a lost ancient advanced civilization. Advanced being that the ancients clearly possessed methods or technology that are unbeknown to us today. For example, like I already mentioned, those 800 metric ton trilithon stones were lifted and perfectly stacked some 30 feet off the ground. Yet the largest and most powerful crane the Romans possessed had a max lifting capacity of only 6 metric tons. Well, let's math this out. 800 metric tons divided by 6 metric tons equals 133 of these cranes that would be needed to lift just one of these stones. No, it is simply not remotely feasible to even suggest that they used this as a method. You wouldn't even have the physical space to surround one of these stones with 133 cranes, which only further adds to the mystery. And never mind lifting the stones. How did they even transport them from the quarry to the Heliopolis? Well, there's been different theorized methods, but all of them are totally debunked when you consider the details. For example, one proposed method is that they rolled the stones over tree logs that would have been sourced from the surrounding forest of Lebanon cedar trees, which are massive themselves and are found in abundance throughout the Lebanon mountains. And by the way, this is the tree that's on the country's flag today. So I decided to nerd out on this one and see if it's even possible for wood to support weights of nearly 2 million pounds, and I was surprised at what I learned. Many of you are already familiar with the Mohs scale of hardness, which is used to measure the hardness of stone, which has been a common argument amongst proponents of alternative ancient history to debunk the bronze chisel theories for how Egyptians mysteriously cut granite with such unbelievable precision, being that granite is simply far too hard of a stone for a copper-based chisel or saw to cut and carve. So that got me thinking, is there a similar scale for measuring the strength of wood? Well, the answer is yes, and it's called the Janka scale, and measures the hardness and softness of various tree wood throughout the world. So get this, Lebanon cedar literally ranks among the softest wood on earth, so soft that it wouldn't even be considered for wood flooring in your home, as walking on it with heeled shoes or placing furniture on it would dent and smush the wood. So ask yourself, is it even remotely feasible to suggest that this particular species of tree could be used for rolling stones that weigh closer to 2 million pounds? The cedar would either crush instantly or at best be instantly deformed from a circular log and smushed flat on the top and bottom, incapable of being rolled. And you should know that this theorized method has never even been tested on anything even remotely comparable. And it's fair to say that it's debunked, which brings me to the next theorized example, which is by far the most commonly accepted theory, which involves the use of capstans and ropes to slowly pull and drag the stone blocks. However, you're not actually going to be able to do this without rolling the blocks in something in the first place, such as tree logs, as they've suggested, but the flat square shape on the front of the stone itself would simply push it into the earth as you pulled it. And again, this method has never even been tested. How many capstans, ropes, and men would you need to drag a stone weighing 1.75 million pounds over a half mile, or even just a few feet? And think about it, if this method did work, once you got the stone as close to the wall as you possibly could, it does not take into account lifting and perfectly stacking the stones on top of each other. Even if they were to use a dirt ramp, as has been suggested, it does not explain all the physics involved in lining up these stones perfectly as they are and getting them here in the first place. Now, let me share something that I already know people are going to be stating in the comments as a rebuttal to what I just shared, and then I will wrap up this video by sharing 2 more fascinating details. Many of you would have heard of the Bronze Horseman, or more commonly known as the Thunderstone, which was a statue commissioned by Catherine the Great of Russia in the late 1700s, and is officially the largest stone ever moved by humans. It started at a weight of 1,500 tons and was gradually carved down to 1,250 tons by the end of its move. And this example is used by many to suggest that the ancients, such as the Romans, could surely have moved massive stones in a similar fashion, seeing as people were able to do so in the late 1700s. However, when you research the nuanced details, you quickly find out that this is not even remotely comparable. Besides the fact that it took 400 men a whopping 9 months to move over a relatively short distance, but here's the thing. They moved the Thunderstone with technological means that were not available to the Romans. Not only did they slide the Thunderstone on advanced iron rails, but also on metallic ball bearings that were significantly more advanced than what was available to the Romans. In fact, it is an established fact that metallurgy had significantly advanced in the 18th century, whereas the most advanced form of iron the Romans possessed was not even remotely comparable in strength. But more than that, none of this could have been achieved if it wasn't for the technological invention of the screwjack, which the Romans did not have as it wasn't invented until thousands of years later. And without the screwjack, the Thunderstone would never have been able to have been lifted on top of the rails themselves. This is a fact that cannot be ignored and is totally inappropriate to compare the technological developments of metallurgy of the late 18th century to that of the ancient Romans. And I must give a massive shout out to Dan Richards of the Dedunking YouTube channel for bringing these facts to my attention.
Dan.
He has quickly become my favorite YouTube channel and is a wealth of little known information. In fact, he is the one that brought it to my attention that the use of the Roman foot measurement was not used by whoever constructed Baalbek. Seriously, go and hit the subscribe button on his channel right now, as this guy is on the rise and is going to do many awesome things in this space. I cannot recommend him enough. Now, here is something that I think you'll find to be incredibly intriguing involving Baalbek being created by a lost ancient advanced civilization. The name of the forest of cedar trees that make up the Lebanon mountains is called Cedars of the Gods. That's quite interesting considering it is in the region that surrounds Baalbek. It's almost as if legends were carried down about the advanced civilization that once constructed this site. And if you think that sounds far-fetched, wait until you hear this. The Lebanon mountains are mentioned in the Bible a total of 103 times. This land is very ancient in regards to human civilization. But here's what's particularly wild. Tradition states that Baalbek is the most ancient building in the world. Cain, the son of Adam, built it in the year 133 of the creation, and in a fit of raving madness and with the help of giants who are punished for their iniquities by the flood. And this is straight out of the Penn Museum, which is located at the prestigious University of Pennsylvania. That's fascinating. And by the way, the very name Baalbek is something to contemplate as well. The name Baalbek means Lord of Baal, or of the Bakwa Valley. God. And Baal was said to be the sky god within the Phoenician region. And in the Bible, Baal is the name given to several different deities who were designated as false gods or idols. And Lord Baal has been even associated with demons and the devil.
Well, the Davos
Many will, of course,
site,
dismiss this all as myth. However, myths are known to originate from some form of truth, which over time are carried down into legends.
Right. And this is the thing. Look, archaeologists are very, very comfortable with when we're talking about what they consider indigenous people. We're talking like, you know, Melanesians, Papuans, like indigenous people of the Americas, Africa. They're very comfortable about referencing these myths when it's in reference to those cultures. But the Bible is an indigenous myth of ours, like of our culture. It's also an indigenous myth. It's just they don't want to talk about that. Isn't Baal just the Phoenician word for Lord? I don't know, but it definitely is something like that. That might be its original thing, its original definition, but it's more than that now.
And ultimately lost in translation. But it seems to me that they were trying to tell us that the site of Baalbek wasn't simply created by primitive prehistoric tribes playing with stonework. And honestly, I do firmly believe that this site is indeed the remnants of a lost civilization that far exceeds what we were taught or led to believe. However, here is one more particular detail that really stands out to me at Baalbek. which is this symbol here, and I discussed it in a recent video and shared the little known fact that it is a prehistoric symbol that has been inexplicably found on
German
5 continents around the world and dates back approximately 10,000 years. It's been found in Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and even throughout Native American tribes of North America 2,200 years ago. Never mind for a moment the modern association of it, which was stolen and bastardized, and focus on the very fact that it is a profoundly ancient symbol and is found on 5 continents long before transoceanic sea travel was thought to be possible.
Look, when you have a symbol like this, what's up, D503? How you doing? So, I was about to say that your name sounds like a stormtrooper name, and then I saw your picture, which looks to be like a imperial symbol. So yeah, that probably is reference to a stormtrooper. But yeah, look, like obviously the mid-century Germans, can't say the word, they used that symbol, but they appropriated it. And if you have a symbol that's used in countless hundreds of civilizations over thousands of years, and then there's one civilization that uses it, it is so ridiculous to me that that symbol is then eternally associated with that one culture. That's just that's ridiculous. I understand there's recency bias and there's the bias of like of the selection of how it's presented in our culture, but that seems it's from an old sci-fi. But like, come on, guys, you gotta let that go, especially when it clearly has such significance to so many ancient cultures. And what is up with that? According to Wiktionary, the word Baal means master, lord, or husband. It was one of the titles of the storm god Hadad and other Levantine gods. So I think that probably has a lot to do, like how Baal became thought of in like Abrahamic texts as being a different definition to us. Probably has a lot to do with them being like fighting the Canaanites and the Phoenicians. And that would have been like their God, not the one true Christian God. You know, if you don't believe in that, that's fine, but I do. That it comes to mean something else to us.
Possible. And there it is, found throughout Baalbek, one of the most mysterious and profound ancient sites on Earth. I do not know what the true original meaning of this symbol was. However, it was known to represent peace and good luck before evil people stole it in the last century. However, I do generally think that this is something that requires further discussion, despite how taboo it is today.
It is.
Now, I cannot wrap up this video without giving a very special thank you to my friend, legendary UFC fighter George St. Pierre. We connected over a shared interest of the ancients, and I was extremely fortunate to travel with him to Lebanon and Egypt last year. If it weren't for him and his special connections to travel safely to Baalbek, none of this would have been possible. I had the time of my life, and I will be forever grateful for this trip. Now, I will of course say that there are many other examples around the world that are evidence of a lost civilization, whether it's the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Osirian, ancient India, various sites in South America. But there's something very special about Baalbek, which allows us to pretty much debunk the narrative that the Romans had built it. Now, that being said, I will be doing a live stream tomorrow.
All right, guys, I am going to get off here. We've done almost 4 hours. That's a lot. Thank you so much for joining me. Check out some of my other videos, some of the stuff, Mayan connections in my videos. If you haven't seen them, my stuff debunking Flint Dibble, that guy is something else. A lot of things that he presented that were not true in the JRE with the Joe Rogan with Graham Hancock and Flint Dibble. Check those out. I also do a podcast, talk to different people, talk to linguists, talk to archaeologists. The Mayans, they were up there. They were up north in the Mississippian culture. I believe that. I think the proof is in the evidence. Thank you so much for joining me. See you guys later. Check me out on Twitter as well. Like and subscribe, all that. And thank you so much.